Hey guys, um, I think there's a problem with the internet connection, but we'll be fine. Live from Los Angeles, this is your host, Young Brando. Welcome to the Watches and Style channel. We're going to talk about an auction that's going on and some other auctions that are coming up. Um, this one we actually talked about in a very quick way. It's an online only, one owner type of thing that Philips does these days. And it consists of 11 lots, all complicated FB watches, some of which were already revealed and showcased in Hong Kong and in New York in the run up to the New York watches number 7 auction in December. There was a whole case of these watches on display there. But here are the 11 lots. We have about 3 days left on the clock for these auctions to finalize. But this is an online only auction that Philips put together of a single owner, and they're calling it Le Concours de Complexité. Um, so let's go through each lot one by one. If you're not necessarily familiar with the currency, they have, in fact, converted the estimates right there, but roughly 8 Hong Kong dollars is about $1. So that can be maybe a quick way to calculate if you are good at maths in your head. So this is number 1. I mean, 8001. It's an FB Jaune chronomètre à résonance. It's that famous watch that works on the phenomenon of resonance through which two discrete watch movements actually regulate each other through resonance. This was a feat accomplished in the world of horology before by Breguet, most famously in a 60 plus millimeter in case diameter of a pocket watch. So it was quite a feat when Francois Paul Jean actually managed to design this watch and managed to realize this watch in wearable form of a wristwatch. And here you see an example in a limited edition with a ruthenium dial, one of 92. And if I'm not mistaken, this is also a relatively early number in that. Yes, number 2 of a limited run of 99 pieces. And once again, I think what is quite striking is the balance between the face of the watch and the case back, right? There is an architectural analogy between the two aspects of the watch, and I think if at times people might take issue with the level and quality of finishing of FB Jaune calibers, which I think most of the time strikes me as pedantic at any rate, but one honestly appreciates the balance of the design of these watch movements. And I think the chronomètre à résonance movement is a great example. of that. As you can see, this is quite wearable, very proportional, 40 millimeters of a case. And the ruthenium dial comes from that early part of the 21st century, so to speak, first few years of our century. So in fact, as you have seen, you have the early movement as well that precedes the introduction of the watch calibers executed fully in 18 karat gold, which makes this even more rare. Those are, of course, since it is something that FP Journe is not going back to anytime soon, since they're not going to make any of these watches anymore, it generally increases the value of these earlier examples of these pink gold movement examples of every single one of these watches. As you see, the estimate has been, I think, in a way, relatively normal and predictable, but it has already seen, as you notice, the higher ceiling of that estimate almost. So we are already at $250,000. So we're already at $250,000 with more than 3 days to go. So you can expect this watch to sell for a pretty penny. Hey, good to see you. Aiden Valento, St. Peter, JB. I hope everyone is feeling well today. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Thank you for checking on me. It's always nice. So this is number one. Number two is Tourbillon Sauvant, which, again, in a way, this is, you might say, the definitive FP Journe watch. There's that charming story about Francois Paul working in his uncle's repair shop and meeting for the first time that famous collector, Dr. Eugène Geschwind, who commissions a watch with him before he had ever made a watch of his own, seeing, I guess, in him some sort of prodigious talent. And that story is also bound up with the fact that Francois Paul always wanted a tourbillon watch himself, but not having the resources, the financial wherewithal to get a tourbillon watch, he had to build one himself. So eventually he built that watch, which is kind of, you might say, this watch in its archetypal form. I should bring up a picture of that. Of course, a pocket watch at that. Let me see if I can find an example of that. Of course, that piece also had a remontoir d'égalité, but let me see if I have. I think it's this piece. No, this is a later example. Let's see, Dr. Eugène Schwind's pocket watch remontoir. Because there's again, there's a very interesting story about that particular watch and how it initially didn't actually have F. Bejon's name, or rather had it covered. Let me see. Okay, this is not going to work, and I don't want to waste too much time with it, even though, as you guys know, I'm very interested in storytelling. But there we go. So I mean, this is again one of the early examples of F. Bejon's tourbillon wristwatches. You can already see that he was still using the Breguet styling for the hands, but otherwise the architecture remains the same. And essentially, this watch in its pocket watch form with a plate right on here with his name hidden on it, hidden under it, I should say. It was signed, made for Dr. Geschwind. And apparently, it is a watch that Dr. Geschwind, showed to many people, but refused to say who the maker was initially. But it was F. Bejon, and he started building these as a wristwatch for select clients at the time. And this was the heart of his first subscription project. And those are, I think, probably 20 watches in total, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just working off the top of my head. So in a way, as much as perhaps F. Bejon is today known for his chronomètre à résonance, perhaps the tourbillon is even more exemplary, even more representative for his watchmaking art, for his design language, and everything. This has dead seconds subdial where the remontoir was on his early, where there was, let's say, a glimpse into the remontoir in the early examples, and of course the power reserve at 12 o'clock. And there's a sense of balance between the tourbillon and, of course, the primary dial of the watch for hours and minutes. And this is lot number 2, which again comes as a full set. You can already see that this is a watch from 2017. That remontoir is actually displayed through the bridges of that 18 karat pink gold movement, and you can actually glimpse it through the exhibition case back. And once again, this is a platinum piece from 2017, and F. Bejon Tourbillon Souverain. And it basically has a dead seconds mechanism here that is operated by that 1 second remontoire. I'm trying to see whether, for some reason, I lost the lost the current bid situation. I guess it signed me out or something. Let me see if I can fix that. Let me take a short break here from the presentation and see if I can fix that. Because for no reason whatsoever, it just disappeared. I signed myself. Oops. All right. Sorry for the intermission. I'll be right back. Okay, that's very strange. Very, very strange. Yeah, this has nothing to do really with my sign login status or anything. I just can't. Odd. I don't know. Sometimes I'm just exasperated by the systems they have, but I guess I won't be able to tell you um, where the bids stand. You might be able to find it out yourself, but somehow I was signed out, and now even when I log in, this is the link to the auction website. Even when I log back in, I can't seem to pull up the current status of the auction. But we know that there's a little more than 3 days left, and the bidding has been going on. And we have seen in lot one that the bidding had already reached the fever pitch of the high ceiling of the estimate. And here we have an estimate that's roughly $100,000 to $200,000 for this FP Jean Tourbillon Sovran from 2017 in platinum. Number 3 is a Centigraph Sovran anniversary edition. I think it just has something to do with my internet connection. So my apologies there. It is executed in a rather unique take of a two-tone with a polished titanium case and pink gold accents. There's some red and orange detailing on the dial as well. Again, this is a relatively recent piece from 2019. And this was 20 apparently a limited edition of 10 pieces only allocated to each boutique after it was dedicated to, let's read it from the beginning. Wearing an FP Jaune creation on the wrist is always a pleasure, but to be armed with a Saint-Égraphe Souverain Anniversaire is truly an honor. This commemorative series was launched to mark the 10th anniversary of each FP Jaune flagship, with every piece individually numbered and stamped with the name of its corresponding city. And apparently this is a Geneva piece, as you can see here, one of only 10 that is dedicated to that particular boutique. Not just a pioneer in the industry, Jaune is also a keen philanthropist and a patron of the medical research carried out by the Institute of Brain and Spinal Cord in Paris. For each Saint-Égraphe Anniversaire sold, 30% of its original purchase price has been donated in support of finding a cure for diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. That's admirable. My grandmother had suffered from Alzheimer's in practically the last decade of her life, and it was very hard on the family, and I can't even imagine how hard it must have been for her. Apart from the Hong Kong edition, where 20 examples were delivered, a limited edition of 10 pieces only was allocated to each boutique. So for the Geneva boutique that was opened in 2007, this was released in 2017. Dressed in a magnificent 40mm titanium armor. Wow, love the copy. The cool toned case is contrasted with pink gold accents that add warmth and highlight the crown and ergonomic rocker at 2 o'clock, complete with a burgundy crocodile strap made for the anniversaire editions. With a single touch, the wearer is able to start, stop, and reset the chronograph with ease, and set the finger in place to optimize precision while using the chronograph to keep time. The ruthenium-coated gray dial is a semi-skeletonized, exposing the gears and levers that power the mechanical chronograph. As you can see, that's what's going on in the subdials. Each subdial indicating the elapsed times from 100th of a second, 20 seconds to 10 minutes is meticulously labeled with a floating sign, an illusion realized thanks to the thin layer of translucent sapphire that covers the openings. Seconds and minutes per revolution, apparently, right? So SPR 20, SPR 1, and MPR 10. So this is 100th of a second per 1 revolution, right? Second for 20, and then minute per 10. Or rather, 1 second per revolution, 20 seconds per revolution here, and 10 minutes per revolution here at the subdial at 6 o'clock. And here's the crown roughly at 3 3/4, and between the 2 and 3 you have the start, stop, and reset. Right. We are actually curing cancer. We say this kind of stuff sometimes to for comic relief, so to speak, right? When some of the watchmakers and some of the executives especially get so high and mighty and snooty about whatever it is that they're doing, um, in terms of their treatment of their customers and potential customers, which leaves a lot to be desired. You're not curing cancer after all, but hey, you gotta appreciate it when a watchmaker or a company makes at least a small gesture, right? And corporate responsibility is a huge topic that I'm not going to address here. Corporate social responsibility specifically, but it's better than nothing. So the three chronograph registers are further highlighted with white chapter rings, drawing the eyes to the red lacquered time scales and small matching titanium hands. Echoing the pink gold accents of the case band, the hour numerals are displayed in a soft orange tone that exposes the dark ruthenium coated white dial. Centigraph, of course, here referring to the ability of the watch to indicate a hundredth of a second, right? The Centigraph Souverain Anniversaire is driven by the in-house manually wound caliber 1506, highly innovative. This movement is capable of counting down to a hundredth of a second. Once the chronograph function is triggered, the seconds hand at 10 o'clock will be released by the watch's escapement and complete a full circle every second. When the chronograph is paused, this hand will stop instantaneously, allowing a decimal hundredth of a second reading. Right? This is making a revolution per second, and as you see, the register is graduated to each decimal. With the discontinuation of the standard issue Centigraph Souverain in 2018, the Centigraph Souverain Anniversaire is therefore the only variant that still holds a place in the current FP Journe catalog, aside from the Line Sport collection, beautifully preserved here. This is one of the first examples of it to be sold on auction, apparently, and it's it's by far and wide not my favorite FP Journe watch, but there's a lot to be admired and a lot to be enjoyed in this unique execution of a two-tone chronograph that can indicate down to a hundredth, down to a fraction of a second. And that had an estimate also of $100,000 to $200,000, and I'm sure it has already superseded that as well. Here are the estimates, as you can see. And this is an auction that's going on. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulty I'm having, but number 4 is another piece that belongs to the Souverain collection. It's from 2009, and you can easily see it's in distinction from the earlier example of the chronometre resonance we had seen that was roughly from 2001. This as a movement, as you see, is fully executed in pink gold. The watch itself is encased in 18 karat pink gold as well, and is matched with this gorgeous salmon dial. And as you can see, the watch has, again, two separate calibers that are juxtaposed next to each other and that regulate each other through the phenomenon of resonance. And as you see, one dial has a 24-hour display, and the other is the regular 12-hour. And this piece also has an estimate of $154,000 to $282,000. Number 5 is a Sonnerie Souverain, and this is a chiming watch. As you know, there is a Sonnerie watch is perhaps even slightly more rarefied and you might also say prestigious caliber compared to minute repeater, pure and simple, whatever that might mean. Nothing quite simple about a minute repeater. But Grand et Petite Sonnerie is a kind of chiming watch that, as long as the function is on, will strike the hours and quarters, right? And that's the Grand Sonnerie part of the complication. And it will also strike the full hour in passing if it is a petite sonnerie as well. This particular example is a customized black dial, which is, relatively rare for FP Journe watches. And as you might know, they have an entire series that's quite collectible in its own right, called Black Label. And you can see you have a power reserve up top here, and down below here you actually have the settings, right? Whether it is going to be Grande Sonnerie, Petite Sonnerie, and silent. And you can see the hammer through a cutout here at 9 o'clock as well. Quite a gorgeous full set in platinum with a number of backup straps, loops, and everything else that goes with it. A matching bracelet. Of course, the chiming watch is an interesting beast because it's such a prestige complication. Obviously, people who buy these kinds of watches expect it to be in precious metal, right? In platinum like this, and uh, in white gold, pink gold, some sort of prestige material, of course. But it's been said very often that more, less noble materials, less noble metals, so to speak, like stainless steel, like titanium, actually sound better. Um, and again, I can't speak to the acoustics of that, but that's something I heard from more than one person. And it's an interesting conundrum for a lot of chiming watches. And of course, watchmakers are quite an intelligent and resourceful bunch. So they come up with different ways of enhancing both the timbre and volume of the sound in precious metal watches like this, in creating extra chambers, of course, which end up being in the same metal for the most part. So that is only a partial solution to the problem. Or, for example, as Chopard did in coming up with more ingenious answers to the question, like constructing a monoblock sapphire crystal and gong that would somehow enhance the sound of the chime of the strike. This is not to say I have actually never heard an FP Journe chiming watch, so this is not to in any way denigrate the quality of sound when this watch is concerned, but this is something that I keep hearing, and increasingly you start seeing in the last few years a lot of the bigger brands releasing chiming watches in titanium, and it's not a coincidence, right? It's because titanium is actually a pretty good material for a chiming watch. It just happens that a lot of these kinds of pieces uh, start at around $250,000 and go well above. So people usually want to see it in a prestige kind of material. In this example, you have a 42 millimeter platinum piece from 2018 in a 42 millimeter case, and the humble estimate is $359,000 to $641,000. And again, I do apologize because of a glitch. I can't seem to communicate with the server to see where the bidding stands right now. I'm sure some of you can already see it. Number 6 is an octa quintième perpétuel. Of course, octa refers to the self-winding movement inside the watch, and quintième perpétuel is perpetual calendar in French. Again, you have all the recognizable elements of an FP Journe wristwatch here. Of course, the characteristic Arabic numerals, the two openings for the day of the week and the month, the leap year indicator at the very center of the dial, the very focal point with the leap year inscribed in red on the salmon centerpiece of the dial. You have guichet opening for the date, big date, so to speak, right above 6 o'clock, and a power reserve of 5 days that is laid out as a crescent between 8 and 10 o'clock as well. A very balanced and beautiful design. The salmon dial, I think, perfectly resonating with the pink gold case. And once again, I think you can, in the automatic movements too, see how nicely the movement is designed and laid out with that barley corn decoration on the 22 carat pink gold rotor weight as well. So you have a self-winding perpetual calendar from 2016 by F.P. Jean. I think the case is really a delight, a little too large for my liking, but again, if there's ever a justification for a bigger case, it's in watches like this where you have much more information to display. So this is a 42 millimeter pink gold case with those dramatically drooping lugs. I think it's a delightful watch. And lot number 6 is expected to fetch somewhere between $51,000 to $103,000. Of course, in a way, you can say this watch kind of diverges from some aspects of F. Péjon's design language, which heavily leans on asymmetry. Um, but I think it's still a very beautiful example. And perhaps what appeals to you is this sort of balanced design, and what better reason to lean on that sort of balance than a very useful complication, a perpetual calendar. Number 7, you have another chronomètre résonance, which again has a salmon dial, a power reserve at 12 o'clock, and again an extremely balanced dial, actually, come to think of it. And this is something that I usually like saying about A. Lange & Söhne and their design language, and how they use script and any form of writing on the dial as a part or as a piece of their design to balance things out. And you can certainly see an example of this here, with the branding at the lower fourth, lower quarter of the dial, with Chronomètre Résonance, the model name, written in this form of a crescent. Even the screw there, even the exposed screw, it looks like an accent on the A, which is just ingenious if you ask me. But you have the model name paralleled here at the upper portion of the dial, remontoir d'égalité. So even the script is doing performing a certain kind of work on the dial. It's not just there to be there. So this is also a beautiful piece, chronomètre résonance with remontoir. for the 20th anniversary of Chronometre Resonance. This is actually in a 42 millimeter case from 2021. Brand new in-house caliber 1520 is what beats inside it. Equipped with a single barrel spring that generates power for the two movements. Again, very striking from the front and from the back. This Chronomètre Résonance Remontoir d'Égalité by FB Jaune. Lot number 7 is expected to fetch an amount between $154,000 and $282,000. Number 8 is an Octa Lune boutique edition, black dial. Again, Octa referring to the automatic movement that beats inside this watch. Lune, of course, to the moon phase. That is displayed here at 7 o'clock. 5-day power reserve and the big date display right here at between 10 and 11 of the main dial of the watch. And I think the black dial is an incredibly nice contrast with the pink gold case and inscriptions on the dial. The present timepiece is a rare Octa Lune wristwatch from the boutique collection, available exclusively via the FB Jaune flagships. Launched in 2009, models from this series are dressed in a striking pink gold black dialed uniform tailored to set themselves apart from the standard issue. Fascinating. The estimated value of the watch is basically $40,000 to $80,000. JB, thank you, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. 49.99. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. St. Peter says, Jean is truly a master of design. I think so. Honestly, you know, sometimes we start taking things for granted after they are done, after they have become so familiar. Remember, I mean, I use this anecdote all the time. I think it's you can go back and see one of the earlier State of the Collection videos by Bill Sanders at the Watch Art Sci channel. I think it's from, I want to say 2017, but it might be even as recently as 2018. And he's talking about his Chronomètre Résonance as this, you know, weird little watch. And he loves it, but you know, it's one of these older ones that has the brass movement, and he feels a little, he talks about it as if he's a little bummed out about the fact that it's the older version with the brass movement rather than the new pink gold calibers. And, of course, none of us quite knew how FP Journe would appreciate, and how, as a result of that, the earlier discontinued pieces like that are never going to come back are going to um, skyrocket in value in a way that's out of all proportion. So we couldn't know any of this. No one knew, even those who appreciated F.P. Journe for his watchmaking art, for his design sensibility, didn't know if it was going to come into public mainstream recognition like this, uh, and in a way so quickly, right? Because F.P. Journe has that sort of conceit about himself, right, as an artist, which I actually find very charming. The more interviews I listen to by him, because otherwise he might seem like a distant and unlikable figure. But whenever I see him talk to someone in one of these platforms online, I always find him very affable, actually, very, you know, someone you can easily empathize with. And I completely understand and respect his self-assessment as an artist. I completely understand, even if he means it as an ironic gesture, when he says, hey, buy my watches while you can and while I'm still alive, because they're going to appreciate even more when I pass away. So it's a serious thing, and it's like, he says it in a joking manner, but hidden in that kind of ironic statement is the recognition that he is an artist, is the self-recognition by F.P. Journe that he is an artist above all, and of course a watchmaker, and a pretty good one at that. um, this is number 9, and we have just looked at the pink gold version of this. This is an F.P. Journe Octa Quantième Perpétuel. Again, divergent in a certain sense from that asymmetric design language of F.P. Journe, separated, distinguished in a way from the majority or from the conventional F.P. Journe watches, which are operated by hand-wound movements. Octa, again, referring to the self-winding caliber. Once again, you have a movement that is entirely executed in pink gold, 18 karat for the bridge plates, and 22 karat for the oscillating rotor weight that is decorated with this barley corn guilloche pattern. And this piece, unlike the earlier example that we have seen in number 6, is in platinum. Number 6 was in pink gold with a salmon dial. And here you have a platinum version with a silver dial from 2012 in 42 millimeters again. Number 19. And apparently the dial itself is a white gold dial that has this sort of frosted finish. So what I simply called gray is apparently white gold. So there's that little beautiful detail and aesthetic touch right there as well. apparently, by the way, if you recognize this, I don't know if you paid attention to it, but at least as far as perpetual calendars go, let me see. Was this 18 as well? Because as far as I know, not that, my Chinese is non-existent, but as far as I know, the number 18, since it sounds like get rich, apparently in Chinese, the pronunciation of number 18 is kind of similar to get rich, apparently. So I like the fact that in the perpetual calendars, they have arranged the date to 18, as you see, lot number 9, which is the platinum octa quantième perpétuel, and number 6, which is the pink gold quantième perpétuel. You have, the bids are back. Finally. All right. I will repeat the current bids in each one once I finish. But yes, number 9 was the platinum quantième perpétuel, and it is currently standing at 550,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is roughly 70,000 in US dollars, with more than 3 days to go. Number 10 is the standard fare in FP Journe dress watches. It's the chronomètre. It's the chronomètre Sovereign, the asymmetric dial with an offset, small seconds between 7 and 8 o'clock, and a power reserve indicator at 3. And of course, you have the famous entry-level FP Journe, which happens to be also one of the most popular FP Journe watches ever, and that's the chronomètre bleu, of course, encased in tantalum and a smidgen smaller than these watches without the power reserve indicator at 3 o'clock and with a very distinctive blue dial. Here you have kind of a silvered dial in this particular example, applied Arabic numerals that echo the pink gold case, which is 40 millimeters in diameter. This is 2021. Of course, even if it looks kind of out of place in an auction that's called Le Concours de Complexité, I'm pretty sure no one's going to complain about that. It's a very elegant looking watch, a very lovely contemporary dress piece. I think these are very beautiful pieces. I particularly love the one that has the Havana dial. That's probably my favorite FP Journe watch, actually. And again, you might have felt like I'm waxing poetic about FP Journe's watchmaking and these particular examples. And I do love them. I do get quite excited about them, but it's by far not my favorite brand, not by my favorite watchmaker. And there are only, maybe 1 or 2 watches that I really like by them. And Chronomètre Sovereign is certainly that particular model. Lot number 10 is a beautiful, elegant, and distilled pure version of FP Journe's watchmaking, so to speak. And it is valued between 200 and 400 100 Hong Kong dollars. It has already reached, with more than 3 days left at the clock, 350 Hong Kong dollars, 350,000 Hong Kong dollars, which comes out to 45,000. I'm kind of blanking out, so I do want to double check, since we are at it, the list price of Chronomètre Sovran, because they have been going up at a steady pace. So I want to have an idea about the pricing. This was a piece, of course, that has won the GPHG prize for best men's watch in 2005. I think it's like 38,000 already. Yeah, 38, 40,000 in so already over list in this auction listing. Hey, then how are you, man? Sorry if I didn't see you a while in the background. How you been?
Hey, FP Johnny.
All right. I'm
Yeah,
glad you're in the mood.
yeah, that last one that you had up, that gold one right there. That one looks nice. I like the classic look. You know what I mean? Very, very
Yeah,
classic.
I like this with the Havana dial. Do you know that one?
I'm not super familiar with FP Jordan, but I do know of the brand and I've seen a few.
Okay, let's see. One of the people around here just got a new one actually from the boutique not too long ago. Oh, there it is. And he that's the right pose, when you put it on a stack of behikes, since the dial is called Havana. So I think this is quite cool. You have this sort of guilloche centerpiece, um, kind of brown, that is supposed to be reminiscent of Colorado kind of wrapper of a cigar. Quite cool. I like, I don't know, I kind of prefer it with the pink gold case. I guess it makes the watch seem a little warmer with that brown dial, but looks great in platinum as well. I can't say anything negative about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that picture it just makes me just want a cigar, really. Doesn't really draw me to the watch. The cigar seems like the main attraction, right?
Well, I mean, honestly, depending on how many cigars you can count in that frame, um, it's already quite rich picture, so to speak. I mean, those behikes sell for some pretty penny at this point. I'm sure it's like probably more than $100 a stick at this point in the US, especially since it's illegal to get buy them at any rate. Um, right? We're not allowed to buy Cubans. Uh yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. It's a shame how expensive they have gotten, but honestly, it helps you appreciate how much quality there is, and you can certainly find the analogy in watches as well. But the unavailability and sheer material worth of Cuban cigars helps you appreciate how much value there is in so-called New World cigars, where you can actually get a great smoke at $20 a stick, 25 at most. And yeah, it's kind of, the watch game is kind of like that, right? There are a lot of great watches that start touching even six figures, but most of us can't get near them. So we look for value. We look for watches that we can actually get and find ways to appreciate them better. I think there's something to be learned there.
Yeah. From what I hear, FP Journe is just like, I don't know. There's some people who are just going crazy for the brand. They're like, "Oh my God, it's an FP Journe! You've got to be kidding me!" They're like, "I gotta have it."
I think there are a couple of reasons for that. If I were the younger, vulgar Marxist version of myself, I would try to explain it by the sheer force of the capital that Chanel put behind the brand in 2017. I don't know if you know this, but the fashion brand Chanel actually has a minority stake in FP Journe. And obviously, that's no small talk. It is important. That coincides with a kind of global marketing effort on their part, the opening and really realization of a lot of boutiques worldwide, and the kind of events they started putting in those boutiques, the way they upped their production ever so slightly so that they could meet the nascent demand. But the other part of that is they are actually, with that sort of rejuvenation, taking great care of their collectors community. So once you actually you find an entryway into that community, like, even if you have just one watch, they take great care of you. And they really try to establish kind of a personal relationship with you, invite you to all sorts of events, give you special gifts. So I kind of understand why people go crazy about them once they actually own a piece or two by them, because they really take care of their customer. They really take care of their collector. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah. I was just curious. I mean, I hate to like change the subject, but I was just gonna think. Are you into cigars? Like, do you know what cigars are good? I was just gonna see what like you think is the best value cigar out there, or something like that.
Yeah, we can switch to that. I just have one more
Or we
piece
can,
there
or
in
just
that.
briefly, we can talk about it.
Oh, we can talk all night, but I do want to finish just that one. It's 11 lots, so we have just that final lot, which is like a bejeweled version, which you actually were screaming about from the chat, going crazy about FP Journe, as you have said. So this is the dazzling and divine diamond set platinum wristwatch. It is in a reduced size, so 36 millimeters. It is a version of that Octa Lune that we were looking at earlier. Moon phase at 7 o'clock, the big date between 11 and 12, and an offset small seconds. And you have a 5-day power reserve indicator, like a fan opening up right above the moon phase. Platinum piece with gem setting on the lugs and the bezel. It's a very beautiful piece, certainly designed with a more feminine customer in mind, but I guess it can be worn by a great variety of people in this postmodern age. What do you think, Aiden? Would you wear something like this?
I wouldn't buy that piece. No.
But if your sugar daddy gave it to you?
Sugar daddy? What the hell? I don't have a sugar daddy. I am my own sugar daddy, I guess.
No, because I mean, the way you put it, I wouldn't buy it myself, but
yeah. I definitely wouldn't buy it, but there's so many watches that I just really, really appreciate. Just from afar, I'm like, okay, somebody else is enjoying this watch, and I think it's amazing, but it's not amazing enough for me to get it. And FP Journe is just one of those brands that, for one, they're just very, very pricey. So, I mean, obviously that can hold a lot of people back, including myself. And two, it's not necessarily like, I don't know if it's really my style. I don't know if I had the money that I would go for this brand. But that's kind of why I hopped on here. I'm interested to learn more about FP Journe and what draws people to this brand and learn more about their designs. So, I can admit it when I don't know, about this brand.
Awesome. I honestly, I mean, in a way, sentimentally, I'm more on your end than a genuine enthusiast of the brand. Of course, playing host to this kind of platform, I have to keep myself informed at a different level. But it's not one of my favorite brands. It's not one of the brands that I chase. But certainly, as you would appreciate a work of art from a certain distance sometimes, I certainly can appreciate them. And this piece, I think, in a reduced size, I think it could be great for a great number of people. I can at times deal with a diamond bezel, but when you have the lugs also covered with diamonds, I think that's one bridge too far for me. But still, it's a very beautiful and elegant piece, and it is currently being bid at 300,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is almost $40,000 by now. And we have more than 3 days to go on the clock. And quickly again, just having a look, number one is currently bid at 2 million Hong Kong dollars. That is more than $250,000 US dollars. That's a Ruthenium Collection Chronomètre Résonance. Lot number two is a Tourbillon Sauvron, which is bid at $1.5 million Hong Kong dollars, and that is 190,000. The Centigraphe Sauvron at number three is bid right at the same range, $190,000. Number four is a Sauvron collection Chronomètre Résonance with a salmon dial and a pink gold case. That is around 170,000 roughly. Number five is FP Journe Sonnerie Sauvron, that Grande and Petite Sonnerie chiming watch, and that is at $5 million, which is in
Cheap.
US dollars 640,000. Yeah, I mean it's like it's like a small country's GDP, man. It's nothing at all. Lot number six again is bidding currently at 550,000 Hong Kong dollars, and that would be in US dollars a little more than 70,000. Number seven is a Chronomètre Résonance 20th anniversary edition with remontoir d'égalité, and that is currently bidding at 1.8 million Hong Kong dollars, which is almost touching $250,000 in US, as we have USD, as we have said. And number 8 is an Octalune boutique edition in a striking pink gold case and a black dial echoing those pink gold accents, and a moon phase at 7 o'clock. That is currently being bid at 550,000 Hong Kong dollars, which comes out around 70,000. All right. So let's talk cigars a little bit.
Well, wait, which one of those FP Journes that you had up? If you still have it up, I was just gonna see which one do you think is the most aesthetically pleasing to you? Not considering price and everything else, just aesthetics. And I know which one I would pick. Curious what you would pick.
Honestly, Aiden, even if I were to disregard the price, again, I can spend days just looking at each and every one of these, and I would enjoy them just contemplating the stuff. But to own, independent of the price, I usually revert back to a time-only watch, quite frankly. So for me, it's lot 10. For me, it's the Chronomètre Souverain. Just the time only power reserve indicator at 3. Just the bare bones, the purest, most distilled expression of Jean's watchmaking. That's what I would pick out of all 11.
Yeah, nice.
What about you?
I would definitely pick the same one. I mean, it's just very classic looking. It appears that it's 18 karat yellow gold, which I prefer.
I think it's pink, but no matter. I think it's pink, but I don't think I've ever seen actually, not in person, a yellow gold FP Journe. But there are always exceptions.
Well, either way, I mean, it's better than it being, just white gold. I think white gold, not that it looks like steel, but it's like if you're getting gold, you might as well just, why not go all the way and just get some yellow gold. And then I think second would be rose, and then third would be white gold would be my pick usually. But I really that's a very interesting, just very clean, simple look.
Yeah,
and I think that gets the job done.
Again, there are always exceptions. I'm sure there's something made for a collector somewhere, but most of the FP Journe models in the catalog come in either pink gold or platinum. So that what you thought was white gold and what is interchangeable, at least in terms of aesthetics, with stainless steel in most people's minds, is actually platinum. And I can see that. Most people, I think, still to this day prefer, if they're wearing a precious metal watch, something that actually shows that it is precious metal. I can't hate on that. I think that's a reasonable reasonable demand, a reasonable expectation or aspiration. I would really love a platinum watch at this segment, precisely because it doesn't really look anything special to the average person, but the weight of it is so satisfying. I don't, just trying it on. Again, I've never owned a platinum watch, but just trying these things on the wrist, it feels different. Like a platinum, let's say, Patek Philippe annual calendar, or a platinum FP Journe Chronomètre Souverain, platinum Lange 1 Moonface, something like that, I think would be actually a great stealth wealth kind of piece at this segment. But I understand. I mean, the pink gold with that brown Havana dial that I just showed before we came back to the auction, that's a beautiful, very striking piece. Right, except of course here it was in platinum, and I think that's cool too. Yeah, I mean, I agree.
You agree that the cigars are getting your
No.
attention more?
No, I agree that this would be the pick of the litter, so to speak. Out of the 11, I know, again, it's not necessarily, well, it's certainly not the most complicated, and it's not going to break any records within this 11 lot single owner online auction that's going to end in about 3 days. But to me, it's the most beautiful piece, and it's a good summary of what is going on with FP Journe. But yeah, so what about cigars? What were you asking earlier?
No, I was gonna say, what do you think is the best value? Some of the best value cigars out there.
Have you ever smoked? Let's start with that question.
Yeah. I've smoked cigars before. Honestly, I don't remember all of the brands that I've tried, and I mean, I quit smoking cigarettes years ago and stuff like that too. So
the brands are not important at all. Tell me what kind of a smoke you like. Do you want something that is really full and strong and a little muscular, or something that is smooth and lighter, perhaps easier to draw, even perhaps as well?
smooth.
That would be your preference?
Yeah, for sure.
I think, something like Arturo Fuente could be a good kind of compromise. I think you can, like, especially if you get them in places like, let's say, that are a little more corporate, like Total Wine or something, like places where you have alcohol and cigars and whatever else, and with a walk-in humidor and everything. I find Arturo Fuente to be quite a good deal. So somewhere between, when you buy it at a place like that, somewhere between $5 to $10 per stick. I think that's quite reasonable. I would probably go for, like, if you want something short, something to try, they have a cigar called Hemingway, right? And as you know, Hemingway was a master of a short, punchy sentence. So that's a decent piece by them. I think there's one they literally call Short Story, which should be around 4 inches in length. So that can be a nice short smoke, and you can kind of see if you want to branch out both within that line and within the brand at all. They are made in the Dominican Republic, which, again, I think is just great. I'm not a purist or elitist when it comes to cigars. So as much as I love enjoying a Cuban once every so often, it's not something that I do on a daily or even weekly basis. Yeah, so Arturo Fuente as a brand and the Hemingway line would be one suggestion. Another suggestion, if you want something that is a little bit stronger, if you want to pair it, I mean, I hope you are 21 years old at least, right? We're not impinging on anything illegal here.
Yeah, I'm actually in my 30s, so we're good. We're good. Like I said, I quit smoking for years ago, cigarettes. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, if I was under 18 or whatever, yeah, I would that would not be
Well,
good if I quit smoking years
trust me,
ago.
where I'm from in this world, people start smoking cigarettes when they're 10, 12. So it's very, very possible.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely not normal where I'm at. I don't really know any youngsters smoking cigs.
So Padron can be an interesting brand to look at if you want something that is a little more muscular, that's a little stronger. Well, I mean, maybe much stronger, I should say. Um, that could be an interesting brand to explore. If you smoke a few Arturo Fuente and feel they are a little too light for you, too smooth, or maybe you are smoking a cigar with a kind of liquor that's itself somewhat overbearing, that's itself very smoky and kind of peaty, perhaps like an Isla single malt, let's say. Then you want to probably pair it up with a cigar that can hold its own, and Padron would be an interesting brand to look at when it comes to that. What else?
Yeah, all you need in life, is a good watch, a really nice watch. And then you just need a cigar and some whiskey, and there you go. You're set. You know what I mean? That's all you need in life. Maybe a few more things, but get the bare essentials down and move from there.
Honestly, Dave Chappelle had this routine in his stand-up saying, like, if a man could fuck a woman in a cardboard box, we wouldn't desire after anything. But I think that's the bare essential. You need a woman first and foremost, I think. After that, perhaps a good watch. After that, I would say your choice of poison, liquor. Mine would be scotch, certainly. And after that, perhaps a good cigar. But that sounds great. In whatever order. In one of the languages I know, there's actually a great song that says something like, my only friends are my smokes and my liquor, and if I didn't have the money, they would have left me as well. So maybe the priorities should be there, making some money, getting the bare essentials, and just moving on.
Exactly. See, you're onto it.
Hey, Gundog, it's nice to see you. JB has some suggestions. CAO is my favorite value smoke. I'm not very familiar with that, but Oliva is also quite affordable. It's also ubiquitous. You can find it basically anywhere and everywhere that sells tobacco products. So, if you just go to your corner shop, I'm sure you can find some Oliva and not many of other brands that I just recommended. Yeah, there's another brand that I really like. It's called My Father, and it's a little romantic in its presentation and a little bit excessive. They have like two bands and then a foot band. It's just a little bit too extravagant in its presentation, and can be a little too expensive for what it is sometimes. But still, if you buy them from a tobacconist, probably not more than $10-15 a stick either. They have a bijou series that's pretty good, that again you can pick and choose depending on the length of smoke you like. But those three brands are what comes to mind. My general philosophy about this is, for a daily smoke, and I try to do it every other day and not every day if possible. I don't usually spend more than $10-15. If I want to treat myself, maybe I get something special. But on average, I don't think I pay more than $20 per stick. I don't think I've ever, in fact, paid more than $20 per stick. Yeah. And you really don't need to, in a way.
Yeah.
St. Peter says, true, but cardboard boxes are getting expensive these days.
Ooh.
Oh man, that's how a man's mind works, man. We want to get a deal. We want to get a deal. Where I would have gotten cardboard boxes on a wholesale if that were our condition. Gundog, man, it's nice to see you. I'm glad you're up and running already. JB says, I buy an acid-flavored cigar to chew on every once in a while, Will Smith style. Is that true? Is it just...
I think, I don't know if he's referring to, but I think that's actually a cigar brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. I mean, JB, if you're playing with me, please let me know. I really don't know what's going on.
Yeah, he might be joking around. He might not be, but I do know that that's a brand. Oh yeah, that's a brand. Yeah, I actually have one of those, that brand. I think it was like $10 or something.
All right. So I actually wanted to, since we are kind of changing gears, I do want to, before we end the day, recognize the importance of the day. And as you know, today we celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the US, when we commemorate the legacy and birthday of Martin Luther King. Of course, officially, MLK Jr.'s birthday is January 15th, but the holiday itself, which has been celebrated since the early 70s nationwide and has been enacted at the federal level in 1986, is usually celebrated on the third Monday of January. MLK was, of course, not only one of the most prominent leaders of and one of the most eloquent spokespeople for the civil rights movement in the US, he was also a man who embodied style in appearance and substance. For his exemplary leadership in nonviolent resistance to racial inequality in this country, MLK Jr. was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. He was at the time the youngest man to have received this award. And of course, more recently, Malala in 2017, I think, received the award at 17 years of age. So that young woman is the youngest person as we speak. Here's the watch related fact. It was as part of the prize that the Nobel Committee actually presented Martin Luther King Jr. with a gold watch, even as he donated the cash portion of the prize to the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. kept this gold watch that you can glimpse on his wrist in this picture, which, as you can see, I mean, this is a beautiful pose. The photograph kind of courses through with the rhetorical, oratorial, and sartorial skills of the man. It's a beautiful, beautiful shot. That watch was a Rolex Datejust 1601 in full 18-karat yellow gold. It's said to have a champagne dial as well, on a matching Jubilee bracelet. And it is also rumored that Rolex was directly involved in the inclusion of the timepiece in the prize presentation. So rest in peace, Martin Luther King.
Wow, gold.
Yeah, I mean, it's let's see, let's pull up full gold piece from that era.
Yeah, I wonder where that watch is now.
I don't know, actually. I mean, it might be one of those legendary Rolex watches that is still unaccounted for. I don't think it has appeared yet in a museum or in an auction or anything of that sort. I might be mistaken. So if anyone else knows in the chat, please feel free to draw our attention to it. Jeff Lane, nice to see you, man. Yeah, St. Peter. Imagine how cool it would be to have the MLK reference Datejust in your collection. I think, honestly, it's actually not. Bob's Watches had an example a while ago. I don't know if they still have it, but it's basically something like this, and it's not extremely expensive. I think you should be able to get this at lower tens. Again, it's not cheap, but it's not prohibitively expensive for a gold watch either.
Yeah, it looks great. It looks that's a stunner right there. That's a stunner.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic piece. And it was just I wanted to write something about his Datejust, and I was doing just a little bit of research earlier in the day, and I came upon this fact. I didn't know that it was actually part of his Nobel Peace Prize package. I thought it was something that he maybe received as a gift, or maybe wanted to treat himself, because again, he was a very stylish man. But it makes it even more meaningful historically. And I've been told also by people close to the foundation that Rolex does this once every so often, if not always, trying to insinuate itself into the Nobel Prize presentations. And, they do it at other levels of celebrity. And the fact that they would do it in Nobel Prize ceremonies and presentations doesn't really surprise me, and is in fact, I think more noble than most. No pun intended.
Yeah, that's a watch that you put on your wrist and you just smile. It's just that's an amazing watch. Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. Mike David, hey man, nice to see you from New Zealand. Hey. JB says, change our country for equality. Yes, I mean, that Nobel Prize acceptance speech is also a pretty good one. I mean, you know the other ones. You know that I Have a Dream, which comes right a year before. But yeah, I mean, the man had a way with words. The man had a way with the crowd. The man had a way with um, really articulating what are seemingly radical ideas in his time in a language that was so striking, so accessible, and so relatable, and a very important character, certainly. St. Peter says, plus, a solid gold date just is less ubiquitous than day dates. Yes, so in a way, it can be even more striking, um, so much more endearing for an unconventional collection. And St. Peter has a thing to say about that. I like his collection. I think it really differs from the kind of usual suspects that you usually see in everyone else's. And Ozzy says we are racing to undo MLK Jr.'s work right now. Yeah, it's U.S. politics is a mess, man. I have absolutely nothing to say, but hard to hard to not relate something from history, something that we can all agree on. A figure that inspires all or simply most of us. JB says, my wife wears the all stainless steel 26 silver dial, just like this Jubilee. Yeah, the Lady Datejust is a great piece as well. And, in stainless steel or in precious metal, I think it's amazing. St. Peter says it's quite Grimm, not to be confused with the Gebrüder Grimm, the German couple of brothers who used to write fairy tales, but it's quite grim. I think that's the English adjective. But what a time to be alive! What a time to be alive, indeed. Aidan, you usually, I want to give you the platform a little bit. I have another auction to kind of skim through and not really meaningfully go through, mostly because I have presented on it before, but it is coming up again. So I do want to do a kind of crash course on it again. But you probably have something on your mind. You probably have a few things to talk about. So I do want to give you the platform.
The platform to what do I want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? What do you want me to answer?
Sir, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, but you usually have a few questions in your mind about watches, so I thought you would just shoot one to me.
Shoot one to you. What is your next potential watch purchase? What are you looking at? Like, what do you want to do with your collection moving forward?
Well, I mean, okay. I'll start with the unrealistic one, even though it is something that I really want to accomplish this year, but more so before I am 40. So I have basically this year and next year to accomplish that. But I really want to get a Royal Oak. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a jumbo, although that would be a dream. I actually kind of love the new reference 16202. Even at list price, it's quite a stretch for me. I think they are already touching 35 plus K out of the door, when all is said and done with tax and everything. So I'm looking at a few historical references in reduced size. I'm not gonna you know, show all my cards because I don't want to, not that I have a big influence, but sometimes I talk about watches and show specific things from Chrono 24 and they're gone before I even end the live stream. So I'm not going to recite all the reference numbers, but there are a few different things that I'm looking at, a few different combinations and iterations that I might try to get if the market continues to trend this way. So that is the less realistic goal. The kind of medium realistic that I didn't really make a decision on necessarily, but that I might just get if the channel reaches 5,000 subscribers before the end of the year is bronze Black Bay 58, because I'm just intrigued by the possibilities of like different patination on that case, experimenting with the material a little bit, getting the case back engraved a certain way to commemorate the channel, you know, what I have been building on the platform, what I have been trying to establish here, as you know, as a basically as a network of knowledge and a kind of intellectual wealth when it relates to horology. So that is a medium realistic goal. I really do want to reach 5,000 before the end of the year. It may or may not happen, but I'm gonna give it a good shot. And what might actually happen, and I think this is almost for certain, I think I will probably add another, you know, sub $1,000 watch. You know, maybe from one of the usual suspects or from one of the other micro brands that have started doing exciting things in that segment. I already have a whole arsenal of Seikos, so probably not another Seiko, but one of these new micro brands that excite me. I might get one of those, and I might actually have a reveal or unboxing in a week or two. So we'll see about that.
Okay, so you're getting something soon. Okay.
I think so. When it comes to that segment, you know, that like quite humbly priced, under $1,000 US, something like that.
Yeah. If you already have a bunch of Seikos, though, why would you just go for something? Just put that money towards something, you know, more expensive.
Well, that's what I always do, but I also have a sickness. You don't understand that, I think. I just need
I mean, I
another
do.
watch like I need a bullet in my head. So yes, of course, that has been more my usual strategy. You know, if I bought every single watch that I pined for just because it's, hey, it's only $300, it's only 500, it's only 1,000, it's only 1,500. If I went about my collection like that, I would probably never buy half of the luxury watches that I have, and instead would have like 4 dozen watches. So that's not what I have. I have 9 luxury pieces, which, you know, I really have put aside money for, and that I worked always with a very strict budget that I never transcended. And the Seikos, you know, even those were never really an impulse purchase. You know, the SKX 007 and 009, those I have in a solid rotation for the longest time as my, you know, beach watches, pool watches, hot tub watches, gym watches.
Yeah.
I added the King Turtle to that because I just wanted something that was green, as you can see. I wanted something with kind of a khaki kind of green or a militaristic shade of green, and the King Turtle was a great piece for that. And the Rowing Blazers piece, I wanted because it's a collaboration of two brands that I really like and feel very strongly about. And as you know, I'm having a giveaway with those watches, with the orange one going up first for this month, which by the
Ooh.
way, it's really funny. I guess no one really wants a free watch, so not many people have signed up. But the giveaway is on Instagram. The guidelines are pretty clear, so if you want to join, please feel free.
Giveaway. Wow.
Yeah. Hey, Oz, how are you doing, man?
It is Aussie Expat.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Can
free giveaway. Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah, the orange one is going out at the end of the month. Only 2 weeks left to join the giveaway.
Yeah,
So,
orange is fun. Orange, fun color.
Oz.
That reminds me of the Seiko Orange Monster. The Orange Monster. That color.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, all right. We can hear you now. How are you?
Good evening. Good. So we're in a race. We both need Royal Oaks before our 40th.
Yeah, we're not in a race. It's a big enough market, and I think, you know, as much as we have similar tastes, I think, you know, there's enough to go around.
It's
I'm
rare,
not
but
gonna
not
buy
that
any-
rare.
Right.
Honestly,
Who do
I'm
you
not
think?
gonna.
The question is, who's going to get the Royal Oak first? You know, I know it's not a race, but I mean, there's going to be one person going first and one, you know, following after. So, who do you guys think it's going to be? Put it in the
Uh,
chat.
Oz. Oz is gonna get it first because I'm cheap, nasty, and I'm also a terrible haggler. I mean, I can't give up on my very strict budget, which sometimes is not realistic, right? So it's and I'm not gonna, even if they were to offer me something tomorrow, since I had horrible experiences with both of the boutiques here in Southern California, I'm not gonna get anything from them. So, you know, my chances of getting one is much slimmer than Oz's. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, my commitment level isn't very high though. We'll see. I don't know. Just man, the last few weeks, I haven't been hanging around because things have gone really badly over the last couple of weeks. Nothing super serious, but it was supposed. I've been on leave now for just over a week, and just oh my goodness, like I'm trying to find an au pair so that when my leave ends, we'll have help, and that took up way too much time already, and then like mid last week we got COVID, and
Oh,
I was shocked. It actually hurt me for like 2 days. I was a little surprised because I'm not unfit, and I didn't really expect to be in bed.
just to clarify for the audience, I think I got this right, but this is your parental leave, right?
Yeah. So I've got leave for about 6 weeks, and it's been terrible. Like, like it's been worse for my wife, as in it's like it's supposed to be time where she can work a little harder. I was like, no, it's just been terrible. I've been sick in bed, then she was sick, and I wasn't much help while I was hunting for an au pair. I was just like, everything's bad.
That
I'm
sounds
supposed to
like-
do a 2022 review on my Aussie Expat 2 channel, just a review of like all of my goals for the year and what the new goals are. Haven't even looked at that. Just sort of like I can't even start the new year yet. I have to just deal with shit.
Wow. Yeah. No, I don't envy you, man. I mean, it's a lot of life changes put simply.
Mhm.
And it's coming at a difficult time for the world,
Mm.
economically and financially speaking. I know you had
Yeah.
a few projects at the end of last year that didn't necessarily, find their fruition. So I hope you put things in a different way, in a different spin this year. But there's certainly, like you said, I mean, that I know the Aussie Expat 2 is kind of non-watch related now, but sometimes it helps to process these things in a different way, in a
Yeah.
kind of narrative form, so to speak.
Yeah, I have to record it, whether I put something on paper first or something like that. It helps put issues to bed, record your goals or record your thoughts, and that way you can review what you were really thinking and why you were thinking such a thing at that time. To the extent I did look at my actual 2022 goals on paper, some of them I was like, what? I don't even know what I was meaning. What are these words? They're non sequiturs. It took me a while to figure out a few things. Like, what the hell was I thinking? Well, I was supposed to get anniversary watches since the start of last year. I was like, what? I only just thought of that in November. It's like, oh, that was actually a goal I was supposed to be working on the entire year. Shit.
Oh man. Look, I mean, at least you did that, right? Because some people would be actually intimidated to even set goals,
Right.
expecting that they wouldn't even get near them, right? It can be quite intimidating to even articulate these things sometimes, because you feel you would feel short of them, right?
Yeah. It can be. I think what my approach for the last few years is a little bit more practical, in the sense that I also have stop points. Like, if I want to make these statements true, there are some things I really should be doing every day. So I make a list of the things that I should be doing every day, and then I also make a list of the things that have to happen at least once a month. So at the start of the month, I sit down with my calendar and say, these are the days that these things happen, and then everything else works around that. So it does help. But what matters more is if you actually care about the goal. There's no point putting goals that you don't care about. Ultimately, like, one of the goals that sort of fell by the wayside was golf. Just that, just like that, with the baby coming and everything, that was probably never going to hold up. But yeah. But I did get the channel in a little bit more order, and I definitely love having a separate watch channel now compared to everything else, and it's a healthy outlet. I just got to find a new format, quite frankly. Like, one of the things I did that helped towards the end of summer was I got a new vlogging setup, so that aspect was easier. But then now winter's been just so brutally cold. I need like an indoor setup, which did become the whiteboard setup, which I've done a couple times. The only problem with the whiteboard setup is my son's home with us now all the time, and I'm primary caregiver of the baby now, so it's just he's just photobombing every time I try to do a video.
I mean, he's also photobombing every time you do a live. But,
Yeah.
at least that's something we welcome. And maybe you should find a format, in fact, that integrates his photobombing.
His
that's
eventual
your only
photobombing.
Like you have
Yeah.
to find a way of making that part of the show in Aussie Expat Watches. I just posted the
Oh,
link,
thank
by
you.
the way. It's pretty straightforward now, by the way, guys. Just that the YouTube introduced this handles thing. So mine is at Young Brando. Aussie's is at Aussie Expat Watches. It's pretty straightforward.
It is nice that they did that. I mean, they've had sort of like handles or easy usernames for a long time, but actually doing the @able things, like I've seen myself being tagged a few places, so I had to take a peek and so forth. It's been fun.
Yeah, I did. There was like the easier kind of shortened or customized URL kind of thing before.
Yeah.
But now they kind of basically put them together. Like, it's both a short address or an easy way of linking your channel, but it's also something that people can use to tag you, just like you do in Instagram, for example, like, hey, look at this post kind of thing, right? So I might be writing a comment on Aussie's channel and I can, tag a third person and kind of call them up into that conversation. So it's kind of funny because this is supposed to be social media, so they should have had this a long time ago, but
Yeah.
hey, it's better late than never.
YouTube's sort of a weird place still with the comments, because you're not supposed to link to other channels, and so adding the tags, tag names is sort of, it's going to happen, but yeah, I don't know where to go. It's funny what's worked over the years. Like, my friend got a lot of traction on his YouTube channel by going to related channels and making comments, and a lot of people would click through on his comment to see what his content was. But we're talking about videos that were receiving millions of views, so any comment may have a click-through rate that was like in the tens, which would be acceptable for such low effort.
Okay, yeah. St. Peter, I just made you a moderator. I just gave you a wrench. Before that, you're simply not allowed to send any links to the chat. So that's why we couldn't see. Yeah, that's a nice watch, but I don't think, and I like actually even 33, 34 millimeter Royal Oaks. I think they can sit quite well. And I like this kind of tantalum two-tone that they do, tantalum with the base metal and either pink gold, or I think this one is even steel. But I absolutely detest anything that is quartz. So even without the second sand, I just can't. I can't, man. Yeah. Again, for
How much
something
is
to
this?
wear on my own. This is probably already sold, but it was at the time 8,000. I'm sure by now it's probably more, 15 to 20,000, if not more.
Yeah. So where do you guys think watch prices are headed in the next 6 months or so? I mean, I'll tell you guys first. I think the prices are headed down in the next 6 months, maybe year and a half. So if I was looking to purchase, a $30,000-$40,000 watch personally, I would probably wait, a 6 months to a year or so and see what happens in these markets. But I mean, I'm a very patient person, and it's not like you really have to have, especially if you have other watches. It's not like you have to have, a certain watch, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
good point.
Absolutely. I mean, in both our cases, that's the timeline, anyways, right? For me, it's November 2024.
Got a bit of
For
time.
for Aussie, I think it's a little before that, but I think he still has
Yeah,
time before 40.
mid this year. So I've only got about 5 months.
Honestly,
see.
I think in look, Japan had its silent decades, so to speak, after the economic downturn. I'm not an economist, right? So I'm not necessarily making a prediction. I'm not saying that it might take us and the watch market specifically to climb out of recession for more than a decade or something. No, absolutely not. But when it concerns the watch market and the kind of high prices that had become customary by the beginning of last year, I don't think that's coming back anytime soon. And in the immediate future, I don't remember the title of this song, but it can't be too complicated. But down, 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 down. You remember that song? That's where the watch prices are going. I think until the end of the year, and if not a little further as well. So, I used to say, wait,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
ahead,
And
go
the
ahead.
thing is, a lot of people be like, oh, you're being negative, or, oh, doom and gloom, or this or whatever. But it's like, well, actually, I'm just looking at the data and looking at the history and seeing that we're not necessarily in a normal spot here as far as prices go, based on the history. So I'm just going off of that.
Yeah. So I think the watch prices aren't the price continuum isn't perfectly smooth.
What does that
When the
mean?
price there's certain frictions that occur and certain people that no longer can play in the market when the price starts going down or going up, right? So when you started seeing throughout last year with prices just going way above retail for almost every piece, there was just an abundance of models over retail. It just meant that there was ample opportunity for flippers, and because these are brand new watches, new to the market dealers, right? The backpack dealers, because you don't need much knowledge to handle new stock. It's it's just new stock. It's not complicated. It's relatively fungible. Now that almost all the models are not flippable, you're going to see the flippers disappear, and that sort of means that the AD starts looking a little bit weird in terms of the deals that are available there, and you start seeing a little bit of weird sort of pricing happening for these models that are now close to retail. Now it's very difficult for them to literally pull the watch out of a genuine purchaser's hands for less than they paid for it. So there's obviously friction around MSRP and dropping below that, even though that's what the market will bear. So the volume that becomes available once you drop below MSRP is just much lower, much lower. And because the volume isn't there, it's not going to support as many dealers. So I think we've only just gotten to the point where there's a lot of watches that will not be acquired below retail for a dealer, as in the dealer offers someone to take a watch off their hands for cash. So that means it's going to take a little bit of time before all these dealers throw in the towel, right? And then you will see what happens, and people have to get desperate with their watches. And where does this new lower volume settle in terms of price? I think it's just much harder to drive below retail than not. I'm not saying it's not going there or not there yet for some watches. It's just that it's not contiguous. There's a lot of friction once you go below retail. You literally have to get someone to give up their watch for less than they paid, and I just don't see that. How many people are going to make that mistake before everyone knows that you can't just buy a Rolex and then try sell it?
I mean, absolutely. I think there is. I think in olden times there was a serious knowledge gap between people who bought watches and between people who sell watches. Now, I have said this many times and I'm going to repeat it. Sometimes a little bit of knowledge is worse than pure ignorance, but I think the internet by and large has rectified that chasm, and that's for the benefit of the customer. So now you have a kind of customer who is more conscious of the purchases, of how of the ebbs and flows of the market. That's for sure. But if things get much worse, of course, a lot of people who have in fact entered the market, who have started dipping their toes into this sort of different segment of the luxury good that they just maybe even didn't even care before, they might just start getting rid of their watches altogether because it's not something that they have necessarily internalized, assimilated, and integrated into their lifestyle, right? So they might be willing to give up on wearing watches again, wearing wristwatches again, because it's something they did not care so strongly before. Maybe they were charmed by the fact that it had become hip, that it had become an investment grade asset. So it was a nice way of showing someone's wealth, someone's knowledge, even. That might disappear in more dire economic circumstances. But in which case, what you said, I think, is really still quite illuminating, because if a lot of those people end up giving up on watches altogether and giving up their watches, I think a lot of times people who buy those watches might not be individual X, Y, and Z, but simply a big volume dealer who is going to snap it and hold on to it until the next uptick in the market. So it's going to be an interesting time for sure. Macro.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, like, a lot of people are like, "Oh, watches are investments." This, I hear that a lot. It's an investment. Oh, an investment. Like, why are you buying a watch as an investment? It doesn't really sound like a very good idea. Like, I guess maybe you could have it, and you're like, well, maybe it's going to hold its value, or and maybe it's more stable than something else. But I don't know. That's just. I mean, don't you guys think that's concerning when people buy watches and they're just like, that's all you hear them talk about is the investment part of it?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
not even buying the watch
100%.
to enjoy.
Look, 100%. However, that doesn't just like my concern about, say, pure speculation is not around whether or not watches are or are not an investment. There are a lot of tangible goods that are investments, and this includes watches. But what you have to be very, very scared of is whenever those tangible goods are no longer delivering their fundamental value, as in a watch is to be worn. Someone who is, say, collecting video games is like a real video gamer, and they just it's something that they wanted from a very long time, to have a complete Nintendo Entertainment System collection and have every single game. And so that's the kind of person that gets that final fundamental genuine enjoyment. I worry when most of the buying and selling is no longer these people, and they are actually people who are only interested in it as a financial instrument. So this attempt to make fungible, tangible assets is usually a worrying sign. So within the watch market in particular, that's unworn watches. Unworn watches is that fungible class that I think you should avoid at all costs. It comes with a premium that's only really attracting, you know, the speculators ultimately, because it's a type of watch, i.e., the fully fungible unworn, because supposedly any unworn watch should be equivalent to any other unworn watch. it gives it that fungibility. It's very attractive to speculators, but has no real value to someone who's wearing the watch, because it'll immediately become theirs once they start wearing it. Like, I think you've seen a lot of YouTubers. There's this company called Masterworks, where the artwork, they buy artwork, and then you're allowed to buy shares in the artwork. And I'm like, okay, but you don't literally own or enjoy the artwork. That's a scam to me. It's just a pure scam. It's just pure speculation, completely devoid of the fundamental value of that artwork.
And artwork
There's been
will
a lot of
probably go
markets where
down
that
as well. I think artwork will probably go down. It depends on what it is, but obviously, just the same as watches. Maybe you could get something that won't. But the thing is, it's like what kind of value? If there was economic hard times, so you're talking about value. I think that, and that's an important thing to think. What kind of value does a car bring? Well, you can go get around to places in that. What kind of value does a house bring? Well, you can live in it, or you could rent it out. What kind of value does a watch bring? It's like, well, I enjoy it and I can see the time, and I guess it kind of can hold value, but it doesn't. It's not. It doesn't really do anything. So it's something that, if somebody's strapped for cash, that's a luxury item is going to be some of the first things that would go.
Oh, sure. You're talking about like functional value versus, say, who knows what kind of value we're saying, whether it's extrinsic or intrinsic value on a watch. Yeah, I totally agree. But the problem is, I sort of try to steer away from intrinsic value and functional value, because these kinds of value propositions tend to be completely uninteresting from an investment standpoint, actually. Like the functional value is very, very limiting, very, very limiting. As in, you can quantify it, and it's very hard to justify any number other than that. Like, for example, super ugly gold jewelry. What's its gold weight? What's its melt value is what you ask.
Scrap
and then, what's its scrap value? But there's no way for it to improve in value. Like, why would you buy that tangible item? Just buy a financial instrument that represents the same thing. Buy GLD on the stock market, So I understand what you're saying, but
yeah. Well, I mean, gold actually has like some industrial uses and stuff like that. And I know that's just one example, but
right. I think industrial use represents something like 5% or something like that, and it's important, but it does represent some of its value. But that would still be raw gold. Like you would say that gold bullion from, say, the Canadian mint is the equivalent to gold bullion from like a Swiss mint or something like that, right? So it's completely fungible. When I talk about tangible assets that are investments, we're typically talking about things that are not fungible. Like, if I met someone on the street also wearing a Hulk, I would not be happy to do a swap. Have a mediator go, yep, both genuine, good, okay. And I would not walk away. I would not be happy if that happened. But if someone mediated a swap of 100 grams of gold or something like that, had a 100-gram bar, someone else had a 100-gram bar, and we swapped it over after validating those were actually 100-gram bars, I'm not going to give a shit about which 100-gram bar I'm holding. So it's that fungibility aspect that is that makes certain tangibles more interesting than others.
But by the way, at the height of the watch market, there were, I think, already a few initiatives and perhaps already a few apps that were realized out of that. And they were trying to implement exactly the kind of model that you talked about when you referred to buying shares or stakes in a work of art, right? I'm not going to name and shame someone in the community, but someone was offering me something like that. Would you be interested in in buying this watch, and I will hold it for you here in the UK. And I'm like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
And I, because for me it was quite clear. The answer to the question, why would you do that, is quite clear, because you are going to take my money, sell me this watch in a vault, in a safe, and then start selling stakes of that watch to a bunch of other people. And to me, that's just counterintuitive. Why would I buy a watch that is going to be in a safe by me or in some other country? Why would I buy a stake in a watch that's somewhere an ocean away? Because for me, like you said, that is my watch, right? It's not just any other Rolex Submariner. It's not even any other SKX 007, right? It's my watch. I wore it. I made memories with it. I wore it that day when this song was playing, and when I made eye contact with this woman across the pool, so on and so forth, right? So it's something that is part of my lifestyle, part of my life.
Did you talk to her?
Of course. I never miss a chance to embarrass myself, Aiden. You should know that. So yeah, ultimately, to me, like St. Peter said, the fact that some of those speculators are at least sitting back down and trying to reassess the situation, it's good news, but it's not necessarily the sign of better days to come. The prices are dipping in the meanwhile, so that means there will be more deals, that there will be more watches in the markets. I have like a 500 piece notepad in Chrono 24 just as a gauge, and every day I receive email updates of price reductions that, 5%, 20%, 25%. Some watches, since the crisis has started, have been halved in terms of their listing price in Chrono 24, which was in most cases wishful thinking on the part of gray market dealers anyways. But all of that said, I think ultimately, we are going through a recalibration in the watch market that might not figure itself out even within this calendar year. So if you are really patient, feel free to wait until the end of the year. If you are eyeing certain kinds of watches, chances are the longer you wait, the better deal you will get.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even fashionable right now, So,
What do you mean?
As in, to be flashing your wealth around while things get
Right.
difficult. It's not going to be fashionable for quite a while. This being said, I mean, I always look at prices as a time machine, where when was the last time this was at this price? How far back did we actually wind the clock? As best as I can tell, we're still sitting at sort of like mid 2020 prices right now. So it's that's still just in the sort of the tip of like the rapid escalation. I mean, to get to real sort of ADs discounting watches sort of level, that would be like 2015 for all watches except for like the Batman and Daytona.
Yeah, but I mean, that's still quite something, right? Because we use 2019 as sort of
Last normal year.
PCE, right?
Yes. Yes, for sure.
And 2020 is already Anno Domini, so it's the fact that we rolled back the clock to the first few months of the pandemic, according to your assessment, I think
Yeah.
that's not too bad already. But I think, look, I think as an average enthusiast and an average collector, I don't mind living in a world where, you can get most watches at MSRP, or maybe with a slight discount, 5 to 10%, maybe a little bit more on big ticket / precious metal items, and where you have to wait 3 to 6 months depending on the desirability of a certain model. I never really expect, again, as an average customer, to find every single thing in the case or in the vault the moment I walk into the store. I just don't shop like that. And I think most average collectors don't shop like that either. So
What does
it's not too bad.
2015 look like for AP?
2015 for AP looks like actually like 2020 for Vacheron Constantin.
Okay, so
they
couldn't sell anything.
I mean, it's like when they started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. They were like, "Oh, okay, people, we can actually sell the Royal Oak and not the offshore, right? We can actually
Right.
sell the Royal Oak to other people than Italians, Germans, and the Japanese." Right? This thing actually has universal appeal. It is now recognizable because the 40th anniversary was 2012, right? And that's when 15202 came out, and it was quite a revelation, not to the extent of 116500, right? It didn't catch the world by storm the minute it came out, the minute it was released and announced, but within the first year or two, the wait lists started emerging and getting longer, but you could still walk into an AP boutique, probably look at one in precious metal, and possibly walk out with that, and get in line for a stainless steel version, and get that, let's say before the end of the year, right? If you were walking into a boutique now, easily before the end of the year, probably within 6 months. So that's what AP looked like. And again, as you have seen, I have just talked about the Royal Oak. Obviously, AP is not only Royal Oak, but that's how the boutique experience was. It's not like they really foregrounded anything else.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know where we'll end up, honestly. I've always said 2019 seems about the right spot. Just reverse the most, the craziest part of the whole thing. But we are talking about a much wider economic problem. So who knows? I tell you what, in the next maybe 4 to 6 weeks, things might get a little bit interesting because the Chinese protested hard enough to get those COVID zero things ended. And then since December and now, they're just dealing with catching COVID. But once they start recovering, they have no restrictions and COVID, their real estate market is trash. There isn't really much friction from their perspective, I think, about picking up, lots of expensive models again as an investment, like what you were talking about, Aidan. Just pure investment. And that's, look, I can't blame the Chinese for doing that. They have literally nothing else they can do. They're not allowed to do crypto. They're not allowed to do, like, the real estate is just so gamed out. It's super silly.
And going for
all
real
things
estate,
being said, yeah,
going for real estate abroad is quite a challenge, that not many people can undertake. And real estate already is even before it's gamed out, it's really a different game, right? It's even when you have a lot of money, it's one thing to break it up to an entire watch collection, which is fungible, potentially liquid in a good market, right? In a healthy market.
Much more liquid.
And certainly much more mobile than real estate. So again, it's not really blaming or hating on people who necessarily approach this thing as an investment asset class. But yeah, I'm okay. I'm interested in seeing this out, because, as you know, Ozzy, this was one of the variables that the gray market profiteers have been waiting for before the year ended, right? They were one, hoping for the Christmas miracle. That didn't come, unfortunately, not to be the Grinch while draped in green. And two, they were hoping for the Chinese market to open again, and that would actually re-energize the market, because the Chinese customer would snap up a lot of these big ticket items. So you think that might come in the next 4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah, because as I said, they've finished with their restrictions. They're done. The reason you don't see anything right now is they're literally dealing with just a lot of people catching COVID. But those waves are going to go through the population just like they did ours and everyone else's. Once they properly recover, we're looking in an investment environment for the Chinese people, where the real estate market, you'd be dumb to try put back into that. That being said, they've removed their 3 lines policy, which was sort of putting a damper on the real estate investing, and so they're removing that. So
what does that mean, very quickly? 3 lines policy?
Basically they had all sorts of issues with the bubble that they'd created. And then there are these builders as well as financial institutions that together support, the investability in unfinished apartments. Like Aidan, we were talking about tangibles and fundamental value. These buildings that are being invested in China are designed and are more valuable, quote unquote, because they're fungible, unfinished. As in, they build a building and it's not finished, as in it's just concrete. It's not actually got the doors and the floors or anything like that.
It's just a facade, literally.
Concrete and steel, but nothing else, And the reason sort of being is that, well, that way it's not deteriorating. You don't have to maintain it. No one's living in there. Right? So it reduces the maintenance costs, right? So it's wild, but I mean, compared to that,
Ozzy,
does a gold Rolex really sound that bad?
It does not. I mean, I could be a great politician, if it weren't for all these people, that we need to actually govern.
The thing is, like, if you step outside the box, though, and you really think about, like, or if you just tell the average person, you're like, okay, get this. There's a watch, right? It's $30,000 or however much. They're like, they're already going to be like, whoa, are you kidding me? Is this a joke? Like, there's a $30,000 watch that
no, 10,000
or whatever. Exactly. Even the 10,000 would blow their. And then you're like, well, I can't really get it now because there's a wait list. And they'd be like, what? Are you really serious? Like, is this a joke? I mean, these things are just
like, I showed
like
my neighbor
wild.
I showed my neighbor like a couple of my sport watches, and I said, like, these are really, really, really hard to get. And he's a normie, so he barely clicks, And then he texts me from Win like a couple of weeks later. It's like, I went to the Rolex boutique here, and it was weird. They didn't have any Rolexes. I'm like, what do you think I meant by hard to get? What, was hard to walk into the store? What do you think
Yeah.
I was saying? What do you mean it was hard to get? Because couldn't go to one of the 5 ADs and thing. I was like, what do you think I meant when I said it was hard?
Maybe you thought you were, it was hard. I had to drive all 15 minutes there and haggle and then it, who knows?
Hey, so sorry to interrupt, but SP just jumped on. St. Peter, how are you doing, man? Welcome to the panel.
Oh man, I'm working like a dog here. Working for the I'm working for the owners of the world, guys. I work for the people that own everything. And I thought it was, at first I was like, I don't know, interesting conversation, right? And at the same time, even though, I know some of the wise men on the panel have advised me to wait, and otherwise I am currently, in the housing market as a buyer, right? And the reason why is because my price point where I'm at is basically at the complete bottom of the market in all the areas that I'm looking at. And I find it really, really hard to believe that somehow at that level, like these particular properties are going to collapse. And the reality is, like, the financing that I qualify for, it's more or less the same as what I would be paying for an apartment in the city, right? So I either continue renting, and currently I have very, very cheap below market rent, right, which has allowed me to, spend money on certain things that I otherwise might not be able to spend money on, right? So that is changing, and it could be changing, as soon as 3 months from now, right? So my concern is like, okay, well, if I drag my feet and say, well, wait and wait and wait, and the interest rates keep increasing, which, people are telling me like, hey, back in the 80s or whenever it was, they were up to like 18%. It's going to get to a point where it doesn't even matter what my income is. Like, I'm not going to be able to afford anything. Like, it's just like, that's it. And I do not see rents coming down. Like, and the reason why is because the companies like the one whose project I'm literally working on right now as I'm having this conversation, and there's several of these big corporations out there that they basically, what they're doing is they're turning into these mega landlords, right? So they're buying up housing stock all over the country, and they're essentially subcontracting out the management of those properties. So they're taking the equity ownership of this. So what's happening is it's turning into this thing where it's just like, it's the same relationship between small, like, family landlord and renter who, like, has no equity, has bad credit, doesn't have any money in the bank, but no matter what, they're going to have to pay the market rate. No matter what, they're going to have to pay whatever the market rate is. And right now in New York, for whatever reason, that is not going down, because there are just people like I was just competing for like a cheap apartment, and the person who came in there was able to just pay for an entire year's rent up front.
St. Peter, sorry to interrupt, but to connect both of the conversations, what Ozzy was saying, and we were marveling at these steel and concrete buildings that are barely more than a facade in China, right? It's actually, the situation is not much different in some metropolitan centers like LA, like San Francisco, like New York, where they do have these new high rises, and they might have umpteen number of units in them, but since they can write it off tax, they list them at these market prices, right, which are actually pretty unrealistic for the average renter. And they can actually sit on them as these international conglomerates, as these absentee landlords, and they can leave them vacant, and it doesn't hurt them economically. Yeah. Right? If there's no one who pays $4,000 to a downtown LA apartment, hey, that's fine. It can stay vacant.
a lot of these towns too, especially New York, just because several legitimate media outlets have kind of looked into this. I know some people are skeptical of legacy media, but I do believe that there still is some good reporting happening out there, and New York is absolutely a haven for money laundering via shell corporations in the real estate market. I mean, and it's just like, I've been here for almost 20 years now, and this is literally like the whole town is about real estate and development. And with all the rapid gentrification that's happened in all the various neighborhoods of Brooklyn, Queens, and it's like it's driven prices up. And I'll just say, like, neighborhoods have gotten way more appealing. When I first moved to Brooklyn, I moved to a neighborhood that was pretty rough. Like, I got mugged while I was living there. It was a violent experience. It was not enjoyable. And that could happen in any neighborhood. It could happen in a nice neighborhood. But it was definitely, I wasn't the only one. Like, I heard about several people in the area I was in, that, but that it, when I was leaving that neighborhood, it was like 2008, 2009 or so, and beautiful, like, iconic Brooklyn brownstone townhouses, a fixer upper that needed a full gut reno at that point in time. You could get one for under $1 million, and one that's in restored condition now, I mean, it could be upwards of 5, like if the restoration was done and executed well. And so, I mean, you're just talking about like these prices that are just completely insane. And as I've been communicating with lenders, right, who are, they're looking at my finances and they're being like, yeah, sure, like, you qualify for this. I'm also expressing my concern, what do you think is going to happen to home values? Like, if interest rates keep increasing, are home values like actually going to decrease? And I think we might see some of that, but there is a deficit for housing in the country right now. Like, one of the reasons why in the US there is a legitimate housing crisis is that there's not enough of it, because the federal government isn't actually building it in a way, and local state governments, they're doing it at such a small scale that it's not actually keeping up with the demand. So you get a lot of privatized development companies that are speculators who are building to make profit, but they're not doing it in a way that is accessible to lower income people that don't already have a bunch of capital. So, like, the problem just keeps increasing as inequality increases also.
So with housing, I would say that if you can get your mortgage less than rent, and I don't just mean you're going to scrape and live in a house smaller than what you would otherwise normally rent for yourself, so just equivalence, you should just take the cheaper of the two if it fits your scenario. Some people can't make commitments, like me. So,
Right.
but this being said, right now, if I bought this house, I'd be losing $1,000 a month paying the mortgage over just the current rent, and the rent in the area is going down. There's too many sellers who've pulled their houses off the market because they can't get the price they want, and now they're saying, "Oh, okay, if I can't sell it, I may as well rent it out." So there's now a glut of rental availability now in Las Vegas.
That's interesting. I mean, I haven't really looked at other marketplaces outside the tri-state area, but it's yeah. Listen, the alarming thing to me is that after 2020 there was a massive spike, and it's come down a little bit, but it's such a small duration of time, like, you can't really tell what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
there are houses that were sold within the last year that were sold for $150,000 that are now in the market for $250,000, which, that to me is insane that
Mhm.
that now, in a lot of these cases, they're flipper houses that have had like surface level renovations done to clean them up and make them more marketable. But it's very surprising to me, and I kind of find it hard to believe that they're going to lose that much value. But again, like, only time will tell. Like, we don't really know. I
I think the stable price will only set in once volume goes back up.
Mhm.
Once the clearing price has been found and people are happy to sell at that price and people are happy to buy at that price, the way you would know that is if volume goes up. Right now, we're talking about record low volume for the housing market. I just want to say something quickly to tie up, between housing, other assets, and watches, is that we have to be like really, really wary when we're the person trying to get fundamental value out of it. We want to wear the watch, or we want to live in the house. Heaven forbid. What a concept! You're going to live in the place, and I'll use, like, say, Nusret, Salt Bay's restaurants where they got $2,500 gold covered steaks and stuff like that.
The guy who appeared in the World Cup
And yeah.
ceremony.
Yeah. So it may seem like a fun and glamorous thing to do. I'm going to blow my load at Salt Bay and just get a steak that's $2,500. I'm going to do that. That's going to be baller. That's what ballers do.
Please, someone in the audience make a clip about Ozzy blowing his
Blow it at Salt Bay.
Yeah, Salt Bay. But and you think that that's what people do with money when they want to spend. They buy a gold Rolex or they buy a gold steak at Salt Bay. But you might not realize that the table that went crazy with 5 golden tomahawks over there and has a table bill for $36,000, they're getting it all comped because that guy's a fucking degenerate gambler, and the bill was never going to mean anything anyway, and it was just paid for by Caesar's Palace because he's a high roller. You got to be wary when you're paying your real earned money for fundamental value and you think you're chasing a price that everyone else is paying, and the reality is maybe nobody's paying that. And that happens when we're talking about investments. If it's an investment, it's sort of funny money. We've all got net worth. People just shuffle their portfolio around. All of a sudden, it's in a couple of meteorite GMTs. You know what I mean? Just seems appropriate for now. So, yeah. But on the other hand, someone who actually wanted that meteorite GMT, there was no new buyer for that watch. There was no new fundamental owner of that watch. So the only people you should be competing against are other people who actually want to wear it. With watches, it's relatively easy. Just the stuff that's unworn. That's sort of like the speculator class.
So
that's why the gap is.
What do you think, like in the case of Las Vegas, for example, with like your particular experience with your housing situation, like what do you think led it to, like, was this like a post-COVID, like past 3 years thing, or has it been moving in this direction for longer than that?
Las Vegas is sort of like, it's always been a town that has had high, fast growth and then extremely vicious pullbacks. So 2008, it was, prior to that, it had experienced like 15 years where every year the population was increasing by like 10, 15%. 20%, and they needed housing stock, another 20% more houses, 20% more houses, 20% more houses, and they were just building. And then 2008 sets in, and that we know what happened to the rest of the country, but instead of there being an inflow of people, new 20%, 30% population increase for the year, the population decreased by 30%. So all of a sudden, there was a vacancy rate of like 25 to 30% because of all these new houses that came online that were being built for the people that they were expected to come, but have now not only come, but 25% of people have just actually left. So it just completely obliterated the market. There was like fundamental vacancy. Like there were just too many houses. Like there were more houses than there were households that could potentially go into them. So you saw house prices go from like probably similar to where they are now, down to 150,000. So from 400,000 down to 150,000 in 2008. Right now, when I moved to Vegas, this house would have been about 630, maybe 650. I think in the peak of prices here, this probably could have sold for 800. right now, this exact model house is being sold down the road, 180 days on the market now, and
Damn.
its current price is 670. It's not selling. It's not going anywhere. So
crazy.
clearing price is probably lower than where it was in 2020. But even at that price, so if I pick this up for 630, say, hey, cut your losses, sell for 630, that wouldn't make any sense for me to make that offer, because I would end up paying in mortgage about 4,500, and I'm not squeamish about telling my details. My rent's about 3,100. This just doesn't make any sense. On a monthly basis, I'd be throwing 1.2, 1.3k out the door for what? To hold on to a depreciating asset? No, thank you.
Yeah. So because of what my income bracket is, like I entered the lottery in New York, because like you could enter at all different. I mean, there's certain housing options where you could earn a fair wage, but it's based off like the average median income. Right. So essentially where I'm at, like New York City basically says if I was to win the lottery, and they look at a bunch of different variables, like if you have dependents, like all this kind of stuff, like what you have in savings, those are all different variables that affect whether or not they allow you to move into, in some cases, like these brand new buildings where they have stabilized rents in them.
Right.
But because of what my income is, that the city thinks, oh, you should be paying 2,500. And when I say 2,500, I mean for like a fucking studio, right?
Mhm.
So like that, you know what I mean? Like in real
Yeah.
terms, like that's house money, So the
Yeah.
idea of like having to spend 2,500 to live, not even have a 1-bedroom apartment, to like have a studio, and I'm seeing that in a lot of the neighborhoods. So anything like the thing with New York, and I have like a rude awakening for this now, because I've been fortunate enough to be in stabilized rentals for like over 10 years basically. So
Mm.
like I haven't had to apply for an apartment in over 10 years. I had no idea how it is, but anything that is cheap, you're going to be competing with a lot of people, and the
Mhm.
landlords, they just want to see you got a bunch of cash in the bank. Like they don't care about retirement accounts. Like it's all just about liquidity. And I don't know if it's illegal to ask for your tenants to pay for a full year upfront, but like I basically got beat out for like what would have been a great apartment for me, walking distance to my office. Like it would have been perfect, by this
Yeah.
person who just came in and was like, I'm paying for the entire year up front. And, there were 25 applications. I was one of the last two. And this other person who's like, I'm paying for the whole year up front. And like, it just sounded crazy to me, because I was like, I'm competing with that person. Like, why
Get
are
flexed on.
Yeah, exactly. They totally flexed on me. They flexed on me for a cheap ass rent stabilized apartment. I was like, what is this person doing? Like, how come they're not paying 2,500
Maybe
for the
maybe
studio?
they St. Peter, maybe
Well,
they didn't spend as
they have
much
a royal
money on
oak?
watches
That's
last year.
absolutely what they did. They just put it in the
yeah.
bank.
I mean, the
man.
biggest risk for a landlord is a tenant that isn't paying. So I would hope that paying up front that much would also garner a pretty decent discount as well. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a tough one with like the buildings that are actually stabilized. Like in New York, I've also heard too, like obviously there are a lot of these real estate speculators that earn passive income off of collecting rent from people. Like it's a very big industry here on the massive, conglomerate corporate scale, and also down to just, the retail investor who's like living in their building and renting out other units, or they have a building in the neighborhood and they have another one that's just collecting rent. But one thing you hear oftentimes from owners is it can be incredibly difficult to evict people. So basically, once you let someone in, like it could take a year to get that person out. So they could just stop
Hmm.
paying. And the courts in general, they typically end up leaning and favoring with the tenants, because if the tenant is actually in economic hardship, the last thing they want to do is contribute to the homeless
Homelessness.
crisis and like all that kind of stuff. So the landlords end up taking the burden But clearly, it's, you know, my experience is like I look at what they're doing and I'm saying, well, if they weren't trying to make passive income off these other units that they're not occupying as housing, like if they just owned and paid for their own home that satisfied their needs, and if you applied that concept more evenly across the population, I generally think it would lower prices because people wouldn't be trying to, you know, I mean, the thing is, it's like, yeah, you can make an argument for saying, well, the landlords, they provide value by putting the upfront cost into the building to create rental units available for people. But if they're taking additional profit from the individual's housing expense and that's going into their bank and they're not building new housing, they're not actually helping the problem, right? They're just making the
Yeah.
prices go up.
Yeah, I mean, I've never paid rent greater than a mortgage, but it's just the places that I've lived in, but that's a case. And Las Vegas is normally a place where renting is more expensive than a mortgage. It is normally, but you know, I came here, you know, just as the pandemic was kicking off, so you know, the prices already sort of raced away a little bit enough that you know the rent was still cheaper. So yeah, it's complicated. I think there's a lot of feelings about it too. I mean, whatever happens, as long as people are actually using the properties, I think that's like a net good. Like I tend to look at the economy and like what would be net good, what would actually be ideal outcome, and normally that requires you to just look at it from the perspective of like, okay, let's just erase money because I can't see and eat money. What's happening, and if there's places that could house people and people are not being housed, that doesn't make any sense, so something's wrong. um, I'm not sure if that happens at the low end much, but it's the high end that actually has that with the empty buildings and stuff like that. I think I saw a good documentary on Billionaires Row where you've got that really thin building overlooking Central Park, and every floor is its own its own building, and there's no hallway. And the whole idea there is that every floor, every apartment is fungible, as in they all look identical. They literally have a different floor level, so there might be some difference in value, but they're all literally the same. And then you're like, wow, oh my goodness, it's like $185,000 a month for rent in those places. It's like, no, don't think that paying $185,000 in rent there is going to give you some highfalutin lifestyle, because nobody actually lives there. You'd be chasing, like I'd say, you know, the gold steaks at, you know, Salt Bay's restaurant, where it's like, no, you don't realize people aren't actually buying that and just like that's a great way to use their money. It's sort of like that was comped, so they may as well get the gold one or something.
Right. And just to respond to Shamba's comment, like, I mean, I'm absolutely considering purchasing a multifamily property and being a live-in landlord, right? Like, I have certain ethical issues with doing that. I wouldn't want to gouge my tenants. And if I could cover the entire mortgage myself, and I could allow someone who maybe, you know, was in a field where their earnings were not super high, so, you know, not shopping around for like someone who's going to be a businessman or someone in finance, but like maybe a public educator or something like that who, you know, had steady employment, and I could give them a reasonable, slightly below market rate, and I could use that cost to offset the cost of my borrowing to cover for that. I look at that situation as like I'm to some extent doing a public service, because I'm offering a housing option that is below what everybody else is offering, and it's not me just being like, I'm going to make as much as I possibly can on it.
In that
Very
situation,
generous.
could you, because was it Bill over at Not a Watch Snob, he was considering doing the same thing, but he's not a person of very high means. He's quite young. I would say I wouldn't.
What part of the country does Bill live in?
Oh, geez. He's in East Coast, but I'm not exactly sure.
Oh, I know. I think it's either Boston or Massachusetts, I should say. It's either Massachusetts or Maine, one of those two.
Real estate in Massachusetts is quite expensive. Taxes are high there, and because of the general proximity to like pretty much everywhere in Mass, you could get to Boston pretty quickly because of how small the state is. I mean,
I mean, maybe Eastern Mass.
yeah, Eastern
a
and
little bit. You can
Eastern and
find
Central
decent
Mass.
real estate.
Yeah,
in
I mean,
Eastern.
a lot of these places, you know, a lot of the Northeast, just like a lot of the rest of America, you know, there have been issues with, you know, old like towns that used to be industrial powerhouses, and you know, and outsourcing the kind of stuff you hear about the Rust Belt. They're obviously, you know, opioid epidemic has really affected a lot of these areas. Like a lot of people have unfortunately, you know, run into issues with substance abuse and you know, you just you can see this stuff, right? So like you can kind of see it in Massachusetts, but like when you're actually shopping for housing there, which because I'm also looking, like I look like everywhere around here just to get a sense of like what are people paying in the Northeast, and you know, when you factor in the taxes, like it's pretty expensive. So but right now like everything's inflated, so I have a hard time believing, especially when you hear about like I should have tied this back sooner, but one of the reasons why I wanted to hop on is similar to, you know, the big players like massive financial companies that are buying up real estate in the country. Like, is the gray market for watches, like, are the watch boxes of the world, like, are there going to be like three or four of these companies that just like they end up having most of the stock, and they, because of how much capital they have, they can kind of weather the storm when like all the smaller gray dealers, you know, they can, like, is it eventually
sure.
going to kind of get into that point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, survival of the money. I mean, screw the smaller companies. I mean, you got to remember the gray market makes a living off of ripping people off. I mean, look at David S.W., America's most overpriced gray market dealer in all of America. I mean, they're charging about 20 to 40% over, and people are still buying it because they're stupid.
There's certain, as I said, it's not granular. As the price moves down, there are certain dealers that just can't exist anymore. As in, if they're selling only new unworn at above retail, there's just going to be watch after watch after watch that is no longer possible for them to deal with. They cannot get unworn watches and pay less money than retail for them. It's just not going to happen. So there's going, and I think at the moment so last year, probably the majority of dealers were that dealer that was dealing only in unworn watches. So that they simply have to disappear. So the majority will disappear, but I don't think it's because Watchbox is so big.
No, not necessarily, but I think it's kind of, I know it's not the most profound philosophical or metaphysical question to ask, but it does at some point beg the question, you know, chicken or the egg. But I have to say that with the volume they have reached, after all, Watchbox is a global conglomerate now, right? You know, it's not just What You Want, it's not just Goldberg Jewelers, right? You know, they have now an entire operation in China that's going to be native born, right? You know, that's going to completely exist within the Chinese system. They have had for the longest time other East Asian bases in the US. They are opening retail locations, etc., and they are, you know, they have snapped up so many of F. Bejon watches. They have built such a great stock of Lange. They have bought De Bethune as an entire company. So they have this muscle to, and I'm using this as a value-free word for now, they have built up this capital and material muscle to manipulate the entire market. So in a handful of very niche brands, to be sure, but they can do that now. So already we are facing a situation where, like you said, the small time dealers who have, at any rate, the backpack dealers, so to speak, that have entered the market in the last couple of years are going to disappear. And trust me, I'm not going to miss them. Don't take me wrong. But what's going to happen? Are we going to be price gouged by Watchbox because they make such good content?
Yeah, so SP, I was just going to say, with the multifamily primary residence and rent out type thing, I'd take a close look at what your runway is if the rentals stop collecting money for however long a normal tenancy duke it out situation ends up being.
Yeah, it would need to be. I'd have to be able to cover all of it myself, basically. That's what I've already told
Yeah.
myself. Like, I have to do that
Good.
because it does
Be
take.
sure to rent out to a single mom of 3, and then every 6 months double the rent.
I'll just Meech. I'll section 8 it, and I'll just get a check from Uncle Sam. That's the best way. That's the best.
There you go.
Make sure, if you do this, make sure it's on Martin Luther King Ave or
Yeah, Marcus Garvey.
Yeah. But yeah, targeting covering it all. That's the best thing you can do. That Bill, who was looking at it, was like, "Oh, this will work out. It'll be slightly less than my current rent, and I'll have an investment." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Yeah, but do you have any runway?" It's like, "What's runway?" It's like, "Do you have any money on the side?" It's like, "No, this is the money on the side."
Yeah,
I was like, "No."
My brother was able to make it work. It was a while ago. Like, he bought his first place for about $250,000 when he was in his mid-20s, just as a mechanic. And he had tenants in there. He also had a roommate as well, because he was young enough to still be okay with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And his out-of-pocket cost for owning that house was about $700 a month, basically, when all was said and done. And I think he had that place for about 10 years or so, and he sold it and made about like $70,000 off off the profit of the sale. So, my family kind of already has had this experience. I mean, the situation, I think, is slightly different now. Certainly the economic situation is different, because I think that was during a period of time when things were increasingly just getting better in the country slowly over time. But, I just look at that kind of stuff, and I look at the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've spent on rent since I've been in New York. And it's like, that's zero equity, right? It's just, that money is just gone. Like, I'll never get it back. And
sure. But I mean, that's what interest on a mortgage is as well. Nothing's free.
That's right. Yeah. Understood. But I mean, listen, all this stuff, there's a lot going. The gears are turning, man. Like, I have a lot to think about, So
No. I think you
Listen,
make sense.
appreciate
Like,
all
if
these
you can
comments.
cash flow that multifamily setup, and that's the living condition that you would be happy with, it sounds like you have the right parameters. The real question is actually finding a place that delivers on those things that you want.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the good thing is, in my situation, it's kind of like, I think I have a little bit of time, but, anyway, man, it's just, I wish it was, like the old days, I feel like working class folk, they used to be able to get into housing easier in the country. And I know it
Yeah.
always goes up and down, but it seems to be, increasingly more difficult for a lot of people who haven't either inherited property or just are in a higher earning bracket. And as someone who's in construction and sees both, like, I see this housing crisis, and then at the same time I'm like, okay, like, that we could be killing two birds with one stone, like if we wanted to actually invest in this, like as a society, if we wanted to say like we are going to do a federal housing program, right, that puts people to work and also creates units for people to live in at the same time. But there hasn't really been a project like that in a really long time, and I think a lot of people are skeptical
but it's
on
primarily government that's in the way. Like building in LA isn't difficult because the air is worse or something. It's not. There's no. It's the government that are putting up the barriers to whether or not something happens.
Yeah, but you do see, like, in certain areas, you'll see a lot of taxpayer dollars that go to funding like a sports stadium or an arena or
Right,
something like
yes.
that, which is like, listen, like, I know everyone loves sports, right? It's entertainment. You could argue that it creates jobs in these economies and stuff, but it's like, I mean, if we could spend tens of millions of dollars on a new stadium, like, we can't we can't create a few buildings that could potentially
Yeah.
house
Or
thousands
we
of people.
could defund all the financial aid we give to illegal immigrants. That's always a path that we could always walk down.
Or we can tax the rich.
Ooh, can't do that. That would destroy the economy.
Yeah, we got to believe in
No,
Reagan
taxation is theft.
trickle down
Yeah,
economics.
I'm not gonna advocate for more theft.
Yeah, taxation
Yeah.
and stuff.
Well, the thing is,
everyone knows that, right?
The thing is, though, if they put higher taxes on rich people or things like that, well, these rich people own certain assets where they'll just increase the price of, say, maybe some housing that they own to take care of that extra tax, or they're going to have to do certain things to take care of that. They're just not going to eat the cost. I mean, rich people, people are like, oh, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Okay, well, yeah, that
Well,
can
then
be
get your money
true,
up.
right?
Make that bread.
You gotta pick yourself up by your bootstraps, and if you're not doing that,
Yeah, I mean, I've always personally seen, and I'm more enlightened now. I realize the problems, but I've always seen housing as being, but fundamentally a consumer product, and hence a technological and production problem. As in, I think our ability, like our absolute ability to construct new housing units, has actually improved in the last 300 years, and probably in the last 20, in the last 10. But for some reason, our ability to actually make housing cheaper there's something wrong. It's clearly not the actual construction side of things. Like that construction technology is way better, way better, right? SP, it's your field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, there's also, if you look at like trends in the suburbs in the States, for example, like like a family who's interested in like there's like this like barn dominium trend, right? Which is like, I don't know if you're familiar with those, but there's a bunch of YouTubers that are they're just really great builders that are kind of out, it's more like country areas, I'm trying to think of where the guy's located, but it's like post and beam construction. So I forget what the exact terminology is, but they're basically building barns that they insulate, like they're building like an industrial scale building that
I know what you mean.
Yeah, they insulate them really well, and they put some architectural details on them, but what you wind up with is a massive house, right, that has like these big, like huge, like lofted spaces on the inside.
Yeah.
And you can do that relatively economically. Like you can get a really good value for the amount of cubic space that you get if you build this barn dominium type thing.
I need that for my home theater.
Yeah, you should check it out.
It's actually pretty common nowadays because it's actually cheaper to put up a giant machine shed and then write it down because you can. I mean, it really fucks with your taxes. It basically puts your accountant on suicide watch because you're hitting two different angles here, and you have to really walk a fine line. But what you can essentially do, and a few neighbors have done this already, is they build mass machine sheds, right? And it's like a 60-40 type thing where like 40% of it's technically their house, and then the rest is 60%. So then they can just write off the building as a home office. It's tricky to do, but it's cheaper, and then you just steal the whole thing out because you just don't want to put like a wooden barn up because you're always going to do maintenance on it. So it's just cheaper to put up the steel.
Shamba Basher, the landlord, has sent in this generous super chat, 179
Kiss on
pounds
the
sterling.
Ooh.
Blows a kiss. Thank you, Shamba. I appreciate you. Man.
Thanks for the
Thanks,
love.
Shamba.
That's a sweet watch, by the way. I feel like the blue dial fluted, full Jubilee Datejust. That's one of the best ones.
Hey, so say for example, and if you don't, just pretend with me. Say you own several properties, and you have them, and you're renting them out, and you have to go, check out one of them or whatever, right? Because you're the landlord. So what watch do you wear whenever you go to check on your properties or check on your tenants and stuff? What watch do you wear?
Full yellow gold date with a champagne dial
Exactly.
and fucking t-shirts. Just
Yeah,
to put the plebs in place. Let them know.
You don't even
know
knock. You don't even knock on the door.
This
You kick the
you
door
wear
and you walk in.
you wear Meech's watch. Don't knock. You just unlock the door. You're entitled to do so as the owner. If you need to, if
You go straight to their fridge.
you
Exactly. Go to the fridge, pop open a beer.
If the tenant's in the shower, you might have to check on the plumbing. Make sure everything's.
Give the toilet a good flush. Make sure everything's working at the same time.
You don't take off your boots, Meech.
Nope.
Ouch.
On your way out, you don't even close the door. You just leave it open.
Yeah. Shamba, I went with a similar one, but I went with the more vanilla version. I went with the oyster and with the smooth bezel. But yeah, it took me a very long time, and it was absolutely a milestone piece for me.
Tiffany OP41.
Tiffany?
The Tiffany dial OP41.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what you gotta do.
landlord watch.
Oh yeah,
Landlord
that's
watch.
the landlord watch. I really wish I went for the coral red before they discontinued it, because when I put in my order for the Datejust, they were still out.
Right. You much prefer the 41 over the 36?
I think at the time I would have gone for 41, but now having a 41 Datejust, I absolutely, with this format watch where it's just like smooth bezel, like big open dial, I would not want it to be as big. I think the 36 OP, especially with a really bright dial like that,
it's already pretty big, honestly. My opinion, like it's about it's 37 millimeters technically, I think. So
I think, by the way, 41 OP41s are bigger than Datejust 40s. I think, like literally, not only in terms of how they wear.
I've heard.
I've heard they were smaller than 41.
I've heard they're smaller. I've heard they're
39.
39. Yeah, I've heard they're 39.
I like the 39, but I think the profile, I think the dial's bigger because I think the bezel width is slightly narrower on the OPs.
The OG 39s felt really small because they really made that bezel like enormous, like bigger than what it had to been, and it just made the dial look microscopic.
Yeah, I'm starting to like the OP. What I appreciate about it is that it's got a fully brushed bracelet.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah,
and it has
so functional.
Easy Link now. It has Easy Link now too, and the coronet is it's recessed. It's not. It doesn't sit on the clasp. The crown on the clasp is recessed, so you can touch up the finish on that without wearing down the look on that. So
that's true.
And I heard like the last run, like the very last run of the 39 mil, the original 39 mil, started to have Easy Links put onto them, but it was never announced. And I came across one. It was a white dial, and I forget the year, but it was like probably maybe like a year before that it got discontinued, or within like a few months rather of the year before it was discontinued. Anyways, I was showing it, and it was new, unworn, and then I made the comment like, "Oh man, these could have been so great," but they just didn't have the Easy Link. And the Rolex rep was like, "Oh yeah, no, this one's got it." And he took it from me and he popped it open, and I said, "Well, this isn't factory, is it?" I said, "This is a Franken watch." And he said, nope. He said they started doing towards the end of the production limited.
Yeah,
And I thought, oh,
interesting.
that's weird.
Meech, did your lady friend, the dancer, did she make a move on a new piece?
No, she got kicked out of the paddock store. So
What? Were you there?
yeah. No, I wasn't there. I'll tell Laura this here. I'll just do the quick recap here. Like in a nutshell, she showed up, and I guess they just didn't good vibes from her, because she just showed up in pink sweatpants, little boots, little UGG boots, and like a giant hoodie with cat ears on it. Anyways, she was looking at a paddock to leap, and they were giving her the business, right? Like, oh, what do you do for an occupation?
Oh, dear.
And she would dodge the question constantly. So basically, what they did is just take the watch back from her. No, they just took the watch back from her, and then they just kind of left her there at the display case, and then she just walked out, I guess. So
She could have just said she was a performer. I'm a performer.
yeah, well, I mean, technically, yeah, that's what she said. She said she was in communications, and then she said she was a entertainer. So
I use my body to communicate. Very important subject matters.
It's hard. It's hard.
It is hard. It's tough.
Yeah. I'd consider getting the OP36 Tiffany. The problem is,
those are still available, right? They haven't discontinued.
Oh, I don't know. Their discontinued status or the fact that they're even still around is like, who the heck knows? My wife got the candy pink one early last year. I don't know if they really exist. I really don't know. Like, I'm not seeing many pop up on the market. Full stop.
Remember when
they're undesirable, Ozzy? That's why.
Remember when dealers were offering to trade pandas for 41 OPs after the Tiffany Nautilus, after Zach bought the Tiffany Nautilus for $6.5 million? Then dealers, that's when the price for all the Tiffany OPs started to skyrocket because it was like it was discontinued around the same time. And then I think price gray market dealers were trading $50,000 pandas.
Yes.
And that lasted for like a couple months or something.
Yeah, but look, I don't know if price finding on the OPs actually exists anymore. Like the whole fake dial situation got so rampant that they don't trade OPs in the dealer groups anymore, is my understanding. It's like, well, you'll see them, but it's just fucking not done. It's too dangerous.
The fake dial thing is one thing, and the fact is that they do have loose dials, that are not fake, but that are put into watches that they don't belong, that they were not born with. So unless you have an absolute full set with the hang tag, you just don't buy those OPs anymore. Period.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you what, my OP has. So typically it's only the white hang tag that has the dial on it. I've got the coffin. The coffin actually has the another white tag on it with the dial reference.
There you go. I mean,
so that's full set.
Yeah.
No. I got it from Nadie.
But I know a certain someone who would pay or have a certain someone else pay on her behalf a pretty penny for that watch.
Oh, there you go.
You're about to say,
Ozzy likes to say, as Ozzy likes to assume, anyways. That's what he assumes.
You gotta live that flipper lifestyle.
So you were going to say something, SP? I mean, I said getting it from the AD.
Oh yeah, no, sorry. I thought when you said white, I thought you said white hang tag, and then I thought maybe it was CPO because they have all that cream.
Oh right. No, we're just talking about the white hang tag. It has the model number and then the suffix for the dial, but the coffin also has that reference on it. So an OP with the white hang tag and the coffin. That's not a bad bet.
No, not at all.
It might be okay.
I mean, you certainly need the white hang tag because, especially for the more desirable dial colors. I mean, it was still to this day, right? A lot of the gray market dealers would say, "Hey, I can source you a black dial or a gray dial pretty easily. Why don't I do that? And we can get you the blue dial, the Tiffany blue dial, for this or that amount. It's pretty easy. Like, they will suggest this, they will recommend this on a daily basis, and I guess that's one notch above in terms of moral spine than just trying to sell you,
That full
Frankenstein
list, yeah.
LP. But
Yeah.
I think it's still bad practice, and it's something that is unfortunately widely propagated. So you have to really find one, if you are willing to pony up the cash, that has at least the white hang tag that matches the watch, and those will probably have a hefty premium anyways.
What do you think about? So they did come out with an official rule that dial swaps were okay at RSC,
Mhm.
but you would have to wait until your warranty was over. So my warranty will be done in 4 more years. My wife did want the Tiffany. What do you think about doing a dial swap at RSC for the Tiffany?
I don't like the idea. Personally, I think it just makes it. I just think it makes it a Franken watch. It's not a genuine Rolex anymore.
Mm.
What?
Um,
I've always had a different opinion about, like, if it's Rolex Service Center and you have the original dial and that's all disclosed when the watch is resold. To me, it's like, it's just a dial swap. Like, if I was a buyer, who all the paperwork was in order, and it's like, here's the original dial, here's the hang tag, here's the box, here's the papers, like the whole deal, and here's the swap dial, and there's a ticket and a receipt from a Rolex service center. Like, I personally don't consider that to be a Franken watch.
Yeah, I think if it's Rolex doing it, I don't count it as Franken. I did encounter the situation with a root beer that had a wine dial. I mean, a wine bezel, and I did more research, and I'm like, well, this is not a genuine configuration, I thought. But then I'm like, I researched, it's like, you know what, the early 80s, if you wanted that bezel that came off the precious metal one, they'd do it for you. So to me, it's not a Franken if Rolex did it.
Well, I have two perspectives. That sort of dial swap was kosher anyways at early in some RSCs. Like, people have done that with OPs in this current run before the warranty expired, and suddenly that wasn't an option. So one thing that I would keep in mind is that I wouldn't necessarily count on that being something that they would keep as a practice. Although if they do, I stand at the same point as St. Peter and presumably you, Ozzy. I think for something that you would do with your watch, and I know your wife wants that specific dial, no matter what, in a way. I think something that is performed by the Rolex Service Center is, in my eyes, first of all, completely all right. But also, it's not the same thing as some random third party swapping in and out dials, which, by the way, historically speaking, when you are in the market for a Datejust or Day-Date from the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc., a lot of times these are, unique dials slotted into watches when you're talking about a rare bird. And there's no way of certifying that when it comes to watches of a certain vintage period. So it's not really out of the Rolex wheelhouse that you would have something like this. In fact, you would have the paper trail to go with it in this case, and it's entirely legitimate, and it has historical precedent, so to speak, if you care about something like that.
Yeah, I think of like that Mark Cho Nautilus, and it's like what made it so appealing was that he had all this documentation that, protected that per the owner's request. And I feel like it's the stories that you hear about companies like Rolex nowadays, when you see all these unique models that were custom orders, and they would never do that again now. That makes me think, like, why not? Like, if you could take advantage of these services, you never know when they're going to say, oh yeah, we're just completely not doing that. Like, I think OC, I forget what watch it was, but like it was either a GMT on a Oyster or a GMT on a Pepsi, and he went to RSC and like ordered the Jubilee, and it's the case is the exact same shape. It doesn't matter what bracelet you have, and that to me is amazing. It's like, now you have a watch with two different types of bracelets, and if you get a different variation with a different color, like when you think about the Datejust, like you could have a smooth dial, and then you could have a fluted, and then you could have Oyster and Jubilee and swap them between the two. Like if you have the two same case watches with two different dial colors, like that to me is like, that's awesome, and if you could get it all directly from the manufacturer and with the paperwork, why not?
Yeah, I mean, look, in my case, for example, speaking of what kinds of things that people do to their watches, when I got my Breguet Type 20, I actually sourced a blue dial, right, which they only had in limited editions, and in stainless steel, it was like a Japanese limited edition that also had an exhibition case back. So there's no intention to fool anyone. If and when the watch goes to needs service, and when I send it to my watchmaker, and certainly not Breguet, I have no reason to subsidize Monsieur Breguet's Hôtel Particulier in Paris anymore. I will just get it swapped to the blue dial, and the watch will live its next 5 years or so like that, and then it will probably return to the black dial for the next decade, so on and so forth, because I'm not moving that anytime soon. Hey, I mean, if I pass when the watch has a blue dial, that's just too bad. But beyond that, I have no intention of fooling anyone that it's a unique example. At any rate, it won't match the limited edition in which it was offered. Like, someone else who knows a thing or two about watches and about that particular model will know that that watch was not born with that blue dial.
Well, if you keep all your components in order and you have a nice paper trail,
Yep.
then whoever inherits all the mass of your wealth, they'll deal with that in the equity, the estate negotiations,
Well, wasn't someone talking about someone who'd gotten a PM Daytona, and he had asked if he can also get a Panda dial, and they gave it to him.
Oh, yeah. That was
two
that was the professor.
Two full watches, or just a
that was the professor. But yeah. So he had a friend who got recently the white gold meteorite dial Daytona on Oyster Flight, the
nice.
so-called Space Panda, and he actually asked for the standard Panda dial, white with black chronograph registers, and they sold it to him. Yeah.
He got two full timepieces, not just the extra dial.
No, just the extra dial.
Whoa!
Loose
So
dial.
he's gonna put a white Panda. He could put a white Panda dial in a white gold Daytona. That's really cool.
I'm not even sure why you would do that, because I mean, the dial that was sold to him was meteorite. I wouldn't fuck around with that, but yeah.
Well, wait, but just to confirm, we're talking about, are we talking about the standard brushed silver Panda dial that's like the normal white one, or are you talking like the full white gold, the full?
No, the one that belonged to the steel 116500 LN. So
that
he
would
got
be
this
so
one.
cool. That would be so cool in there.
He got this watch, and then he also has for whatever reason, again, that I can't decipher. Not this one,
Hmm.
right? Which is the other option in white gold, but he actually got the standard.
That's very surprising that they sold
On the knife.
to me that they would sell that, because he could potentially make a unique reference out of the.
They shouldn't have. I agree with you completely, SP, but they did.
Well, that'll be a pretty cool like sleeper watch, right? Because when you look at it, it's just going to look like a panda on an Oyster Flex, but they
Right.
don't make a panda on an Oyster Flex. And then, you know, if you look closely enough, you'll notice like, oh, that metal's like a little more yellow looking than steel.
Yeah.
No.
Well, the case is different.
Yeah,
Between the steel.
The shape is different, right? It's like the symmetry is slightly different on the precious metals, and the lug lengths are slightly different and that kind of stuff.
And
right?
of course, there's that end link structure, you know, that
the non-removable part on the Oyster Flexes. Yeah. That really is one thing that really bums me out about how they sell the Oyster Flexes. I think they do that with the leather strap versions, right? Also, they have that. It's like permanently affixed end link in there.
This part.
Little hood.
Yeah. Kind of a drag that they do that. I mean, imagine how nice it would be to be able to get this and then also put a bracelet on it. You know, especially if you're spending close to 40 grand. I feel like.
I mean, I think technically speaking, yeah, of course. I mean, that would be nice to have that option. Technically speaking, at least Oyster Flex and leather straps should be interchangeable. I think that can be a retrofit that RSCs might even countenance if they have replacements in stock. So if you have an earlier reference that came on a leather strap, possibly. I mean, I don't know. I've never tried something like this. Possibly they might sell you an Oyster Flex.
I've seen videos online of just you know, a home, like just a guy who owned an Oyster Flex, like he put a leather strap on it or vice versa. You could find those videos on YouTube.
No, that's for sure. But I'm wondering if an RSC would do that for you. I'm not too sure, but it doesn't seem out of all possibility.
I think it depends on the client.
As always, because you remember that story you told about OC's GMT.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had the Oyster Pepsi, the Pepsi GMT Master 2 on Oyster bracelet, and he asked for the Jubilee bracelet, and they wanted him to pay and take his original bracelet, and he had to basically say no, but I still want that extra bracelet. And it took a bit of back and forth, I think, and they couldn't resist him.
Oh, so, they wanted to,
because he's the puppet master. He's the master manipulator.
True.
Yeah, so I mean, look,
they wanted to keep one of the bracelets.
Yeah, they wanted the original bracelet. If you want to change
I think this is mostly confusion. RSC weren't very clear to their ADs what can be offered to customers, basically. I know there's people who have just called RSC directly, have been able to get it, but that was like really early on. And then
that confusion is intended, though. That's the issue. I understand it might be a confusion. I understand that RSCs in different parts of the world have different policies, and they may or may not communicate those clearly to the authorized dealers. But when something happens so often and throughout decades, you know that's Rolex policy to be confusing about things like this, because they just don't want too many examples of these sorts of tinkered watches.
I think they're also they know that, you know, the real heads, you know, especially clients that have purchased multiple pieces who know other collectors, they're going to tell their story and they'll be like, you can't do that. I went in and tried to get this done and they wouldn't let me do it. Right. And then people start telling those stories, and then without even an individual actually going to the brand directly to see if they could do any of these things, they're just like, no, you can't do that. My friend tried. They wouldn't do it for him.
I'm actually a little surprised that the second bracelet on GMT was actually that popular of a thing to do. In my book, if I wanted the second bracelet, I'd just buy a second GMT.
Well, but that's kind of the scenario I was trying to describe before, right? It's like you get Batman on an Oyster, you get a Pepsi on a Jubilee, and then you can just swap them out.
Exactly.
You got the Batgirl, and you got two versions of a Pepsi.
Exactly. Where I'm coming from with that is like the extra bracelet's not fucking free. It's a lot of money. It's like 2,000 something, right?
They're crazy. I thought they were like
So,
three or four grand or something like that.
Yeah. So to me, I'd rather put that $2,500 towards the second GMT, not just the
down
bracelet
payment,
that
if you
I'm
will.
Yeah. Well, the problem with the bracelet is you're guaranteeing that you're not going to wear one.
Yep.
Like you're guaranteeing you're not going to wear one. You're reducing the value of the bracelet by half.
If you have one case and two bracelets, yeah, it's true.
All right, shall we reel this in? It's past midnight here in Los Angeles, and I think we are coming to a close. In tomorrow's show, I'm gonna talk about the Antiquorum auction that is coming up in Monaco this weekend, or basically, this Thursday, I have to say. It's going to start on January 19th at 2:30 p.m. Central European Time. I have already gone through the lots of this auction in pretty good detail before, but I'm going to have a little run of some of the more interesting watches. Today, what was in the thumbnail was this Breitling Copilot 765. That's the reference number chronograph. That's Breitling's heritage interpretation of the pilot's chronograph in this beautiful configuration. I will come back to these tomorrow around the same time. Guys, any final statements? Anything else that you would like to bring up before we close? No? All right. Well, this was great. Thank you to all my panelists, Aidan, who jumped on early, St. Peter, Big Meech, and Aussie Expat. Speaking of which, check out Aussie Expat watches and support him in the same way that you support me. And I'm really grateful for your presence and support. Thank you, Shamba Basher and JB, for your generous super chats, especially JB. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for your questions and interventions from the chat. Please hit the like button on your way out if you haven't done so already. I appreciate you, and I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, I bid you adieu. Take care.